Thank everybody for coming. It is truly an honor to welcome such an exceptional group of Rabbanim, B'nai Torah, professionals, entrepreneurs, and community members gathered here today. Firstly, I would like to sincerely thank the Rabbanim for their time, effort, and dedication in joining us today to be mechazik and inspire everyone here. Your guidance, chokhmah, and leadership are invaluable, and we appreciate your willingness to share your insight and strengthen our community, both professionally and baruchni. In the world of business, success is often measured by numbers: revenue, growth, expansion, and influence. But as B'nai Torah, we understand that true success is measured not only by what we build, but how we build it. This summit is more than business strategy. It's about aligning ambition with responsibility, innovation with integrity, and financial success with timeless Torah values. Halacha gives us the framework for ethical conduct, honesty, fairness, and accountability. Hashkafa gives us perspective, reminding us why we work, what our priorities are, and how success should ultimately bring greater meaning to our families and how to bring kedusha into our lives. Ultimately, Torah is not only a system of learning straight from a rule book, but a way of life that must be rooted in Yiras Shamayim, a constant awareness of Hashem in everything that we do. It's that foundation that guides us in how we act in business, how we speak, how we make decisions, and how we define true success. We live in a generation of unprecedented opportunity. Technology, global markets, and entrepreneurship have opened doors our grandparents could hardly have imagined. At the same time, these opportunities bring real challenges. Balancing work and family, maintaining spiritual focus, navigating ethical dilemmas, and ensuring that our pursuit of parnasa strengthens rather than weakens our values. Today, throughout this summit, we hope to create meaningful conversations around these very questions. How do we thrive in business without compromising on who we are? How do we bring Torah principles into boardrooms, partnerships, negotiations, and leadership? And how do we build not only profitable businesses, but lives of purpose and al-pi kiddush Hashem? Our Rabbanim bring tremendous wisdom and experience, and I encourage everyone here to listen openly, engage thoughtfully, and connect with one another. Often the greatest value of these asifas like this comes not only from presentations themselves, but from the relationships, ideas, and inspiration that emerge throughout the day. Thank you all for being here, for investing your time, both in Ruchni Stika and for helping bring a stronger future for the Monsey community. May Hashem grant us limitless hatzlacha in all that we do, with continued siyata d'shmaya and parnasa b'shefa. And as we're in the Hashlama from Shavuos, we should be zoich to be oil l'regel l'binin bayis ha'shlishim her v'yameinu amen. I'd like to call upon Rabbi Roth to say a shir.
Yashikoyach to the ones who organized this amazing event. It's a first, I think, for Monsey. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and teach Torah. Today's discussion, I know that the MC set a very high bar of what the summit will accomplish. But I hope in this year to cover one small topic, but it's something that's very important. And it goes to the essence of being Jewish. It's a halachis that are only negeya to Jews. And it's a true Jewish value. It used to be, times of old, that everyone who did business with Yidden knew that when they said something, they could take it to the bank. A word of a human, of a Yid, meant something in business. And we're here to be mechazik that, and to show that it's rooted in halacha. Many people believe that honoring your word in business is simply belongs to the Mesilas Yesharim. The Mesilas Yesharim is not a small thing. We should all engage in Musa as well. But it happens to be that it's rooted in the Shulchan Aruch. The truth is, as we stand now, Motzei Shavuos, and we know that Chazal tell us that every mitzvah you're doing is mushba v'oimid mahar Sinai. Meaning that Yidden made a shvua at Har Sinai to keep the whole Torah. And it's a shtickle milsa d'tmiyah. Why? If there's no Torah, what's that? What does a shvua mean? A shvua is one of the halachas in the Torah. But if you tell him that every mitzvah you have to keep because you're mushba v'oimid mahar Sinai, it must be that shvua precedes, it comes before Matan Torah. What value did a shvua have before Matan Torah? And the answer is that when a person gives his word in a strong way, which is a shvua, it had power even before Matan Torah. Reb Shimon is very marich about this. That means the power of the word is the power of the human being. Rabbi Yoina says that svas emes is migisoide hanefesh. The human being, if words, if the concept of speaking and giving your word loses any meaning, the humankind was affected. So we're going to spend time again from a purely halachic perspective. How to deal with giving your word in business. We're going to begin. Chazal tell us a concept called mechusar amana. The definition of the word mechusar amana means one who you can't trust his word. He's not a trustworthy person. One who doesn't honor his word is deemed a mechusar amana. Now, we're not talking about people that lie. Someone who lies means that he said something that was untruth. We're talking about somebody who said the truth, but he changed his mind, and he no longer wants to honor something that he said. That's not a chson of sheker, it's a chson called mechusar amana. The Mishnah says in Masechta Shvius, Kol ha-metaltelin niknem b'meshicha, V'chol ha-mekim de'ez dvoroi ruach ha-chomim noicha emenu. In Choshen Mishpat, as it is in secular law, la'avdol, not everything means, not every time you speak does something happen. In order in Hilchos Choshen Mishpat, in order for something to transfer from one person to the next, in order for something to have a toikif, it has to have a kinyan. And we all learned in yeshiva, we learned about kinyanim. And the kinyan ha-metaltelin is called Mashiach. Whatever it is, that there is kinyanim and there's whole simonim in Shulchan Aruch when a kinyan happens. A kinyan is a consummation of a deal, and at that point, no party can back out. So the Mishnah says that there are things, Kala Metalzelin is Nikna b'Mashiach. But even if you didn't do Mashiach, if you honor your word, Ruach HaChamim Noichem Banu. So this sounds like it's a nice, virtuous deed. But the Gemara says in Bab Metzia brings a brayso that says that one who does not honor his word, Ein Ruach HaChamim Noichem Banu. So here we see the opposite, Ein Ruach HaChamim Noichem Banu. And not only that, the Gemara brings a machloikis Rabbi Yochanan and Rav, and the Gemara paskins like Rabbi Yochanan that yesh b'dvarim mishum mechus ha'amonah. That means that one who gives his word must honor it. And if he doesn't, he's considered mechus ha'amonah. Rashi brings that the pasuk says in the Navi, she'eres Yisrael lo yasu avlov lo yidabru chazov. One who's Jewish, she'eres Yisrael, has to honor their word. This halacha is brought in Shulchan Aruch and Choshen Mishpat, Siman Reish Dalid. The Shulchan Aruch says in Siv Zayin that one who gave his word must honor it. And if you don't do so, you're a mechus ha'amonah. The Taz says in Yoredei Siman Reish Samach Dalid Siv Kotten Hey that one who's oiva mechus ha'amonah is called a Rasha. Now, I've seen many pashkeviln, they hang up signs about people that they're Rishoyim. Most of them are lav dafke Rishoyim. But when Chazal give you a name Rasha, it's pretty strong. They don't just throw around this word. One who's a mechus ha'amonah says the Taz is deemed a Rasha. The Michas Pitim says, don't worry, he's not Posel Eidus yet. Because usually a Rasha is Posel Eidus. Says no, doesn't become Posel Eidus. Says the Michas Pitim. But he says it's Mutal and Bezdin to let him know, you should know you're not allowed to back out, and if you do, you're a Rasha. That's pretty tame. The Maram Mintz has a tshuva, and he says that one who doesn't honor his word is not b'chlal oisa ma'isa amcho, because it says she'eres Yisrael lo yasu avlo. We're supposed to be moichiachim and be mevayishim berabim. Bezdin is supposed to be maken ayusoy ad she'teitzei nafshoy. And vayloi, he says, kisufa d'olam hazeh d'olam haba. That's his picture of somebody who doesn't honor his word. When dealing with a non-Jew, the Gemara says in Masechta B'choros, the concept of mechus ha'amonah is relaxed. Because since they don't honor their word, you're not mechuyev to honor the words more than they do. But in something that in the world of business is considered unethical to back out, then a Jew would be mishubah to mechus ha'amonah, even to a goy. Before I go into the halachas and the protim of mechus ha'amonah, I want to deal with two subjects. One is which is more chomer than mechus ha'amonah, and one is which is a little more kal than mechus ha'amonah. The Gemara says, and many Rishonim paskin like that even though mechus ha'amonah is only a issa d'Rabbanan, but there's another issa which involves your speech and giving your word, which is worse than mechus ha'amonah. And that's called echad b'peh ve'echad b'lev. That means, if you never intended to do it, you just gave your word without ever intending to actually follow through, then according to many Rishonim Yehoiva Issim and HaTorah, the pasuk says, Hein tzedek, hin shaloch tzedek, v'lav shaloch tzedek. So if I'm looking to have a plumber come fix something in my house, and I give him a call, and he knows that I want this thing done today, but he also knows he doesn't have any time today. And he also knows that if he doesn't tell the person he's coming today, he's not going to get the business. So he tells the person, don't worry, I'll be there by 5 o'clock. He never had an intention to be there 5 o'clock. He can't be there 5 o'clock. He has work till 7 o'clock. He's coming tomorrow, first thing in the morning. But if he says he's going to come at 5 tomorrow in the morning, he's not getting the business. That's called echad b'peh v'echad b'leiv. That means you gave the person an avtocha to show up today. You had no intention to do so. You never intended to do so. So you are oive a isse do'iraise of echad b'peh v'echad b'leiv. Somebody goes to shul, and they're bidding on the aliyahs, so that he knows that this fellow is buying this aliyah. There's no question about it. He spends no matter what. So he figures, I can get him, hike him up. So I'll play around with him. I'll bid. But he has no intention to ever buy it. That, I think, grad is not echad b'peh v'echad b'leiv. Because if he gets stuck, he'll have to honor it. So, if it gets stuck, but if he's the gabbai, he knows he's not getting stuck, it's just a question of maneuvering, and he's going to hike the other guy up, I believe that the gabbai was oiva echad b'peh v'echad b'leiv, because he never intended to buy it. He just simply is putting it out there to fool the other person, to get him, to be able to bid him up. Many people sign contracts, they go into contract, they actually give a deposit, but they know that at the negotiating table, they're going to drive the price down. They're never intending to buy it this way. So it's a tactic. We lock the guy in, we get him good and desperate, and then at the closing table, we drive a bargain, we knock him down, and we get what we want. Such a person was oive echad b'peh v'echad b'leiv. Means he never intended. It was never a havamin he's going to buy it at this price. Besides that, it's the tochen is also over the isse, one of the atzeres hadibros. Maybe he's over lo sachmoid because it's a isse of chomos. He's basically forcing the person in the last moment where he doesn't have a choice, and the alternative is a lot worse, to drive down the price. Again, these are things that Isurim De'oraisa. People think they're business tactics, they're good, they work, they've been tested, true and tried, and they takadu. And someone would call him a good deal maker. But if you try to copy Goyim what's called a deal maker, we have as all examples today, you'll be able to do the derech hagoyim. But if you want to be a yid, she'eres Yisrael lo yasa avla. This is not the way to act where you're echad b'peh v'echad b'leiv. Many times people, they go to work for somebody and they sign a non-compete. Why did they sign the non-compete? Their attorney told them, don't worry, you can't uphold it in court. It's okay, sign it. That's echad b'peh v'echad b'leiv. It means, you signed an agreement, you gave the other person your agreement that you're going to follow this, that's what you said by signing it, and you never intended to do so. You already did the birurim from before that it's nothing, it's good. Don't worry about it. You can ignore it. Everything's fine. You don't have to keep it. That's echad b'peh v'echad b'leiv. If you're going to sign it, you have to agree. Even if halacha will say that some reason you have no obligation to keep it, that could be something that happens later. But if you intended never to keep it, that's called echad b'peh v'echad b'leiv. So I spoke about giving your word and you never intended to keep your word. That's worse than b'chus ha'amana. And then we have something that's mamish Jewish, and that's less than echad b'chus ha'amana, and that's the concept of doive emes b'vavoi. The Gemara says in Masechta Makis, there's a pasuk in the Novi, v'doive emes b'vavoi ki goyin Reb Safra. What's the story with Reb Safra? Doesn't say in the Gemara, but Rashi brings it from the Sheiltis that Rav Safra was once in middle of davening Shmoyne Esrei. And in the middle of davening Shmoyne Esrei, a guy approached him. I don't know if it was a guy. Someone approached him to buy his wine. And Rav Safra, he offered a price. He said, I'm buying your wine at, $5 a barrel. And Rav Safra didn't respond because he was in the middle of Shemona Esrei. The person did not realize. Obviously, he wasn't shuckling all that much. And he didn't realize it was in the middle of Shemona Esrei. So he said, I'll give you $6. He still didn't respond. $7. He still didn't respond. By the time he finished Shemona Esrei, he was holding at $10 a barrel. When Rabbi Safra stepped out of davening Shemona Esrei, he told the person, I'm going to honor the original price at $5 a barrel. Because when you said it, I really agreed to sell it at $5 a barrel. Just I was davening Shemona Esrei. So I couldn't respond. Meir says that's called doiva emes b'vovod. I mean, something that you agreed to without verbalizing it to the other person. But there was a meeting of the minds to sell it at a certain price, even though the other person doesn't know what's going on in your mind. But since there was a meeting of the minds, doiva emes b'vovod. Agav, I want to tell the oilam, you're all from Monsey. I'm going to tell you a word. It's from my favorite words from the Alte. The Vishnitzer Rebbe of Monsey, he said on this Gemara, a tremendous word. I think that it's no Misha Oimroi. He said like this, what's the Doiva Emes B'Vover of Rav Safra? He said, imagine the Chazon Ish was in the middle of davening Shemona Esrei. Do you think he would hear somebody offering him a deal in the middle of Shemona Esrei? Why not? So Rav Safra is in the middle of davening Shemona Esrei, and someone's offering him a deal. Does it make sense for Rav Safra to say, I heard in the middle, you offered $5 and I agreed. The doiva emes b'vovoi ki goy Rav Safra. He was truthful. He was in the middle of Shemona Esrei and he heard. He was able to be moided that he heard in the middle of Shemona Esrei that someone offered him $5. Now, boys say, that's a doiva emes. Someone who thinks of such a word is also a doiva emes b'vovoi. He's honest. He is who he is. He's not going to say what he isn't. Rav Safra, and Rav Safra was great. He heard. And if he heard, he was moide, he heard. But coming back to this Gemara, the Gemara says, Kegoy Rav Safra, doiv emzov, you agreed even, listen how a Yirish, so the Gemara says, in Baba Basra, doiv emz b'vava, Kegoy Yerushamayim, Kegoy Rav Safra. So the Masham says, no, you have to be a very big Yerushalayim to have to do doiv emz b'vava. Regular people don't have it. But in Igris Moshe, Shulchan Aruch Harav, Meiri, it's much like that in the Sheiltis, it applies to any Yerushalayim. If you want to be a Yerushalayim, you should even honor doiv emz b'vava. No, you're not a machus hamoni, you're not bad, but so far, doiv emz b'vava, if you were machlit 100% that you're going to do something, even though the other person doesn't know, if you both agreed, there's doiv emz b'vava. Now, I'll give you an interesting scenario of doiv emz b'vava. What happens if a father was machlit, he's giving his son a gift, and he never told his son, but in his mind, he made up that he's giving his son a gift, and his son never found out about it, and then the father says, you know what, you're crazy, forget about it, changed his mind. The Rav Shulchan Aruch Rav says, doiv emez b'vavai, since this is a one-sided transaction, a matana only happens on your side, if you already made this achloti that you're going to give him, doiv emez b'vavai honors that. He gives it. That's pretty tall order. There was a Yid who intended to send somebody a price, for a certain item. Let's say you sell wire, and you intended to send the person a price that was a cheaper price. Because you agreed you're going to sell it to him at $2 a foot. Instead, by mistake, they wrote on the invoice $3 a foot. And the other person got the invoice, he said $3 a foot, good. He approved it, and he went. When you see later that what happened, you say, oh, I intended to sell it to him at $2 a square foot. Is that doiva emes b'vavoy, that you have to honor your $2 a square foot you wanted? There's a sefer called Levush Mordche, where he writes, no. There was never a meeting of the minds, because the buyer never thought ever that he's going to buy it for $2. He only heard of $3. So never was there two minds thinking of $2. There's no doiva emes b'vavoy. So here I'm going to give you a scenario that happens every day. There are people, when they handle a deal with somebody else, they always move, there's certain people, they always move the price up before they talk to them. Why? They know this guy, he needs a deal. Without a deal, he doesn't buy anything. So what does he do? He has a mahalach. Instead of starting at $5, he starts at $6. Then they'll handle, the guy will get, oh, you know what, I'll give you a noche, I'll go down to $5. And this way, this guy feels good, and he gets the price he wants, and everything's good. So this guy did it, and he intended to sell it to the guy at $5, and he offered it to him at $6, and he was ready for him to bargain. He didn't bargain today. Does he have to give it to him at $5? And the answer is no. There's no doiva emes b'vavoy in this. Because the other person never intended to buy it at $5. He only heard $6. So since there was never two minds thinking, no doiva emes b'vavoy, even a Yireh Shamayim could still sell it at $6. You see, sometimes I have to have a cooler too. We're here to discuss what the halacha is. I'm not going to mix in emotions, because I want you to realize whatever I say today is halachas. It's not just because I don't feel it's yosher, or I don't feel it's right. And if I will, I'll tell you that this is my hergish. But this halachas, the halacha is that this case there won't be doiva emes b'vavoy. Okay, let's go back to mechus hamana. So we have a concept called mechus hamana. You let me know when my time is over, because I lost cheshbon of the clock. The concept of mechus hamana is where a person, we said, gives his word to do a deal. So somebody will say, this is not normal. I can't do business. What do you mean? Every time I say to somebody something, that's it? It's done? It's binding? So the rule is in mechus hamana that it's not considered a mechus hamana until all particulars of the deal have been finalized. That means, while we're in a negotiation mode, where both parties are still negotiating, anything I say is not binding. I can always pull out. So that means, let's say I'm in the middle of negotiating with you. I want to sell my car. This guy says, I want $1,500. This guy says he wants to give $1,200. So I said, I'll think about it. I'm not sure I want to sell it for $1,200. Not sure. Then, at the end, he decides he doesn't want to sell his car at all. He just wants to keep it. So there's no mechus hamana. You don't have to sell it. Even though you said you're willing to sell it at 15, and even if the other person will say, now I'm willing to buy it at 15. This deal has not been finalized, because there's still hamdlarai. Nothing was finalized. When it's finalized, at that point, the deal is finished, then mechus hamana begins. Up until then, that means the only thing that's missing in a mechus hamana is that you didn't actually do a kinyan, you didn't consummate the deal. But everything was finalized. So if I walk into a store, and I want to buy a couch, and I walk in, and they pick out, and they show me all the couches, and I'm machlit, you know what, this is the couch I want. Great. How much is the price? Gives me the price. I say, good, I'm going for it. I would like to buy this couch, and at this price. But there's 4 colors. Green, blue, purple, I don't know. I'll leave it to your imagination what the 4 colors are. There's 4 colors. And I didn't decide yet which color I want. So since that deal has not been finalized, if I decide now to not buy this couch because I want to buy a different couch, I'm entitled to. The deal has not been finalized because until I pick a color, I don't have a couch. Couches come in colors. It's part of the deal. It's got to be finalized. So until the particulars of the deal are not finalized, one is not bound to this arrangement. If I want to send my child to a play group, to a morer, to a babysitter, and I come to terms with them, and I ask them, but I say I'm 99% I'm sending, but there's a little tzad I'm not going to send. And they even have a reason why they're not going to send. They say because of this and this reason. And at the end, it doesn't turn out. They didn't take. You're allowed to back out. The deal has not been finalized. You need to finalize a deal with certainty. The deal is finalized. And when the deal is finalized, at that point, Mechus HaMona kicks in. Sometimes the deal has one side. That means one side finalized and the other side was given the chance to still finalize. That means I tell the person, listen here, I'm ready to give you a slot for your child in this playgroup. The mother says, I'm going to still think about it. So the morer says, okay, I'll agree. I'll commit to hold the slot for you for 2 weeks till you get back to me. Now, the morer wants to pull out. She says the deal wasn't finalized. But she did commit that she's going to wait 2 weeks. Is that considered a Mechus HaMona? The deal isn't final. You can still back out. If you can still back out, can I still back out? So this would be not so simple if there is Mechus HaMona or not. It would really depend, can I have Mechus HaMona on something that's not really something that I can make a kinyan on? Meaning, I'm committing to wait. Committing to wait is something you can buy. You can buy a commitment to wait. In halacha, you can't buy that. If you can't buy that, it's questionable whether you can have Mechus HaMona. But the Ramah happens to paskin that you can have Mechus HaMona. The Ramah says that if someone offered somebody that he's going to be a sandik, he had a boy, and he offered sandikoyas to someone, and then he decided, you know what, I want to give the sandikoyas to somebody else. The Ramah writes, it's Mechus HaMona. You're not allowed to back out. Now, this sandikoyas is not something you could buy. You can't buy sandikoyas. But still, the Ramah holds that there is Mechus HaMona. So the pashtus is in such a scenario where somebody gives a commitment to wait, there's going to be an issue of Mechus HaMona for the person to back out. Many times people sign a contract. All the deal, they have the whole contract is signed. The whole deal was finalized. There's no issues. There's just one thing that they write. It's subject to attorney review. Today, this is an abused clause. Subject to attorney review was meant to be if somebody didn't show it to his attorney yet. But it was already seen by the attorney already finalized, the attorney already redlined it. It's just another gimmick that some people use to back out of a deal after it's been finalized. One can question if such a thing is Mechus HaMona if you back out. There's nothing that happened. You just changed your mind. The deal's fine. Your attorney didn't review it again. He had nothing to review. It was done. Can you say that this is still Mechus HaMona? Is it Mechus HaMona? Because basically the deal has been finalized. You're right. The contract is not binding. It does say a subject to attorney review. And that's a clause to make the contract not binding. And therefore there's no kinyan, but there may be Mechus HaMona. If it's not, it's still doi v'emes b'vovoi. That's for sure. You were not Mekayim doi v'emes b'vovoi. So a Yiras Shemayim, a Yizicha won't consider him. Whether it's Mechus Amana, one can debate, but it's definitely questionable if it's not Mechus Amana. If a person has an office that he doesn't do all transactions himself, he has a business, he has a secretary, they place orders, they do things. So one of his employees committed to doing something, there was no Kenyan, is he subject to Mechus Amana? The Gemara is Mavur that a Shliach is not Mishabed the Balabayis to Mechus Amana. But it's Mavur in the Achroinim and the Rishonim that that's only true on things that you suspect that the person needs permission from the boss. That means if he's dealing with a deal, the deal needs the boss's approval, yeah. But if he's buying paper goods that it happens every day, and this is the department that takes care of it, and they don't need the boss's approval, because if they would get the boss's approval of that, his business would close down. So then their words are binding, and there is Mechus Amana for one to back out. So if they agreed to a deal already, shouldn't back out. The concept of Mechus Amana applies to a buyer and to a seller. A buyer who commits to buy, and a seller who commits to sell. Mechus Amana applies as well to employees and employers. That means, if I'm an employee and I committed to take a job, if one backs out and he no longer wants to do this job, so even though the halacha is po yochel lachzor b'chatzi hayom, a poil is allowed to, from a halachic standpoint, he's allowed to back out. There's no binding kinyan that locks an employee in. Still, the Sma writes that there is Mechus Amana if one backs out. I many times get the question, probably every year, probably a dozen times. Their children, they have a 15-year-old daughter, a 16-year-old daughter. She commits to being a counselor in some day camp and or you commit to sending her to camp. You give them a deposit, and now you just want to back out. So again, if you back out, that's Mechus Amana. You can't back out just because you change your mind. Oh, no, my friends, I decided, I heard some of my friends are going to someplace else, I'm going someplace else. That's Mechus Amana. And I tell parents all the time, this is one of the most important chinuch lessons you could give. Imagine you tell your 15-year-old, she's such a nebuch. She's a little girl, she's going to go uphold her word. Can't do that to her. I understand, if you're 50, got to keep your word. A 15-year-old, so that's called a chinuch. You basically told your 15-year-old, don't worry, your words are nothing. So what's going to happen when she becomes 25? Now her words are going to become, by the way, this is my hergish. But the halacha is that she's not allowed to back out. Because if she gave her commitment, you're stuck. That's what a commitment means. A commitment means even if the halacha is not binding, but Mechus Amana is something that one has to honor his word. Many times, people commit to investing in a deal. People commit to a partnership. All these have the concept of Mechus Amana. Again, if the deal was finalized with all its pratim, one who backs out is considered a Mechus Amana. The Gemara says that even gifts have Mechus Amana. That means if somebody committed to give somebody a gift and he backs out, he's considered Mechus Amana. When it comes to gifts, though, the Gemara says it has to be a matana mu'etes, a small gift. If it's a large gift, then there's no Mechus Amana, because the people that get from the person a haftocha to give them a large gift know that the person may back out. Because gifts are gifts, and giving a large gift is something difficult, and therefore the person is not soymech on the one who said he's going to give the gift. So I'm going to give you a story that happens to me. It happens to me at least once every Pesach. You know, the Rabbanim, they give before Pesach or Purim, they give them a check. One check bounces always, at least. Okay, it bounced. But it happens to be if the person doesn't come back and give you another one, I'm never going to ask the person to fund one. But that person has a mechus hamana. Because when he gave me the matana meruba, he told me, when he gave me a check, he's telling me I'm giving you a matana. And if it's not meruba, then he's got to keep his word. If you give a bar mitzvah boy a check and it bounces, you're obligated on mechus hamana to go and give him another check. That's a matana, even a matana. Now, if someone tells his child he's going to give him a gift, the B'tzel HaChochma says, even if it's a large gift, children trust their parents, even on large gifts, and there's a machusa amona if you don't honor your words. So again, every time you give a gift, before you think twice, before you commit, because when you commit, it's done. There's a machusa amona if you back out of that gift. Now, if the person that you committed to give this gift to was a person who happens to be an oni, the halacha is, many poets can say that it's now deemed a neder tzedakah, and you're actually bound by Hilchos nedorim to give him the gift. So even if it's a matana meruba, you must give it to him. So before you commit to somebody and you're not sure if he's an oni or Osher, be careful, because you may be stuck with nedorim, not only mechus hamon. How much time do I still have? Okay, so till now I told you all the chumras about mechus hamon. Now I'm going to tell you the coolest of mechus hamon. So you shouldn't think that that's it, I'm done, my life's over. No, mechus hamon is actually something that you're able to keep. So the first kula mechus, which we'll primarily focus on, the kula of mechus hamon, is a concept called treitari. And that is, what happens if between when I committed and I actually want to perform, something changed? Am I still obligated to keep the commitment that I gave? So, if you look at the Gemara that talks about treitari, about mechus hamon, by the way, if the other wants to learn the sugya, if they want to check out if I said the truth, you can learn the Bob Metzia, Daf Mem Ches Amud Beis, Mem Tes, 5 minutes, Mem Tes Amud Aleph, you'll see a whole Gemara about mechus hamon. But if you look at the Gemara, the simple case of the Gemara was that the price changed between when he committed and he had to do the deal. And the simple Gemara says that if the price changes, there is mechus hamon. That means if I committed to sell you something at $1 and the price went up and now it's worth $2, and I want to back out because I only committed when it was $1. Now it's $2. I want to back out. So the Gemara, the simple reading of the Gemara is that it's a problem, and there's a whole list of Rishonim that hold like that. L'umazeh, there are some Rishonim that hold that if the price changes, one is allowed to back out, and therefore there's a machloikis in the Rishonim. If you'll open up a Shulchan Aruch, Siman Reish Dalet, Sif Yud Aleph, you go to the end of the Siman, the Ramah brings both opinions, and the Ramah is machriya that it's Osher to back out. That's the coolest. No, so the Ramah Taka says it's Osher, but the Shach over there brings a Bach that's not sure. And many Achroinim say that there are Mekilim to back out, and the minig ha'olam is for sure to back out. Now, one can't bring a raya maybe from the minig oilam because maybe they back out always. But the truth is that there is a mokum la'okal, and that is taka the minig on the skabel, that if something changes, one can back out. And therefore, if a price changes, one can back out from his commitment that he gave originally. Now, I just want to touch on a couple of things. What happens, not if the price changed. I found out that let's say I hired someone, I found out that he's not suitable for the job. Now, if he's not suitable in a way that it was clear that this person it's a metoyus, like, so that's a mekach toyus. You could even undo a kinyan. What happens? He's not suitable, but can't make a mekach toyus out of it. Still, one can back out. Even though many points say a Yirush Shemayim shouldn't back out even when the price changes. In such a case, he can back out because it's a mistake. It was never a commitment on this understanding. So one's going to say, good, if the price changes, I never committed. That's not considered a mistake. That's considered a new thing that happened. New things that happen are not considered mistakes. Their commitment is real, and there's a new thing that happened. But if it turns out that this was never good, if a taka is not good, then one is not bound to his commitment. And that's according to everybody. You don't need the heter of treitari. The most important question which you get every day is what happens if I found out that somebody has it for cheaper? I committed to buy it here, and now I found out that there's a cheaper price someplace, so I want to back out. The Gemara, the Rishonim are talking about when the price changed. The price never changed. Simply, it came now to you realized that you can find it someplace for cheaper. There's a machloikis in many achroinim whether in such a case you have the heter of treitari. But I want to tell you my hachroah. If it's something that you could not find out before, and that is, you can't know every price, but this is a piece of information that this Pashat wasn't shy for you to know. It came to you by way that you couldn't find out from before, then I believe one can back out if they find it for a cheaper price. Still, a Yirush Shemayim won't, but you can. But if you didn't do your homework, and you decide to do your homework after the commitment, but as soon as you do the homework, you find the prices that are cheaper, but you didn't do it before, that's not called a change. That's called that you were lazy before. Nothing changed. You had the opportunity to find out from before. You didn't find out from before. And such a person is committed to the things that they commit, that they're going to go through. And one should not use the heter of treitari in such a case. So again, Aboisai, I'm ending with this. I'm going to tell you a story that happened this week. Somebody calls me that they hired somebody. And now they find out that for the clientele that they hired someone for a school and for their type of students, they think that this person is not being successful someplace else with those type of students, and therefore they want to back out of their commitment. So, if it turns out that she's taka not capable, you come back out. But if it turns out that she has a way to make it work, but you want to back out because you're not interested anymore, it's already, you could have made this phone call before. The way the person found out afterwards, they could have made before. They should not be using the heter of treitari. They should be sitting the person down and trying to see if they can figure it out to make it work. A person, when he gives his word, it means something. She'eres Yisrael lo yasu avla. We hope that Yidden will keep their word, and the Rabbi Shloilem gave, we say every day, V'shalayim ircha, Berachamim toshev, Sishkem b'soicha kasha dibarta. Don't say more than that. V'sishkem b'soicha kasha dibarta. Why do I have to do it? The Bosham say, I just said. Oh, so I said. No. When the Bosham says something, we say, the Bosham said. The Bosham gave us a chelik alikam mimal to say, when you say something, you should honor it. Our boys say, Alei v'atzliach.
To the Rabbanim, I just want to thank the sponsors, Leviton and Associates, MedEquip, Layer, White Eagle Company, Palisades Care Coordination, and Dwight Capital. So I'm going to ask the question, and the Rav can, either both of them or the Rav can pick. My business is closed on Shabbos, but due to growing customer service demands, it is becoming very challenging to remain fully closed. Is there a lechatchila way to hire a non-Jewish employee to handle customer service on Shabbos?
I would ask Rabbi Roth the Shaila.
No, he won't. So first, let's. I don't have a lechatchila way, but I'm gonna I want to just explain what's happening, the nidolim, and then we'll see what and if there's atzeres. So the question again is: can I hire an employee, a goyish employee, to take care of customer service? So let's. It's just important for everybody to realize there's a issa of schirus v'kablonos. That means one cannot have a goy work for you on Shabbos. Chazal atzeres is the rabbanon to have goyim working on behalf of a yid on Shabbos. Even if you made up before Shabbos, you're not actually talking to them on Shabbos, you spoke to them before Shabbos, if you hired them and they're working for you on Shabbos, there's a problem. But there's a chiluk between a schir yoim and a kab. A schir yoim means someone who's paid by the hour. Someone who's paid for the actual work, hourly work, if they're paid, that's called a schir yoim. So if you have an employee that's paid such and such an hour, that's called a schir yoim. If a person's a kablan, means that they're paid by the job. Means, if let's say I hire a plumber, an electrician, that's called a kablan. So a schir yoim on Shabbos, to do malacha, there's no real atzeres for a schir yoim. For a kablan, which means someone that's job-oriented, so the halacha is that as long as you're not kovei malachto b'Shabbos, that means they don't have to work on Shabbos, they could do it at a different time. Then, where there's no maris ayin, which means that they're not in the tchum Shabbos, the halacha is that it's mutter. So you have to have two tanoim. It can't be maris ayin, it means it can't be in a place where it's apparent that Yidden can see him, so the pasha, the only case is to add in tchum Shabbos. And it has to be, he's not kaveh, means he does not have to work on Shabbos. So let's go, I just gave you a general, now let's talk about this scenario. So we have someone who's going to take care of customer service. Most probably that person's going to be paid by the hour. It's very hard to pay them by the job. So that person will be paid by the hour. I don't have an atzeres. Maybe Rabbi Kleinman would be better than me. I don't have an atzeres. If the person somehow could be turned into a kablan, which means that I could figure out how to make it job-based, that means, l'moshel, I could say that for every service, for every customer they take care of, they're going to get paid a certain amount of money. Man, it makes no difference how much time they sit. They can sit a whole day. If the only one customer calls, they get paid for one customer price. They get paid not for the time. They get paid for the actual job. And I tell them, you don't have to answer any calls on Shabbos. By all minds, if you want. Don't respond to any calls on Shabbos. If you think that's practical, then you can technically have someone take care of the customer service on Shabbos. It's not very practical. Doesn't usually work. So the only thing to have is to just sell your business for Shabbos. To do a heter mechirin. It's a bit b'diavad. If you don't have a choice, Obviously, you should speak to the local Rav, whoever your Rav is, to find out and suggest, do you really have to do it? Shouldn't you really be doing it? That's the only edge I have, and I will leave Rabbi Kleinman to see if he could come up with maybe more coolness.
I echo everything Rabbi Roth said. It's a double pashut that it's together kaveh malach to the Shabbos, if he has to answer the calls. There are those who want to say that a demand-based malacha, which means that I didn't tell them to do something, but rather they're responding to a need, responding to a random customer who comes. There are those who want to say that that's not considered kaveh malach to Shabbos, and I think it's open to Shulchan Aruch, not like that. It's halacha of merchatz. That if you have a merchatz that's open on Shabbos and he has to provide for customers, it's mavur with it that it's Osher. And when we learned the halachas of Amir Lenachu, and learned it together with the Rashiva, he named them for a davar pashut. He assumed for pashut the simplicity that it was begeder kaveh malach to the Shabbos. The only real eitzah, like Rabbi Roth said, is the hata mechira. So I just want to be nice of something on the hata mechira. There are various forms of mechira. Most of them are more begeder heter than mechira. It's less mechira and more heter. And when it's less mechira and more heter, it turns into an isser. That's what happens. So came to me two people. They have a business, a huge business. And they live on the East Coast. And they told me that they sell their business. They want to work on Shabbos to sell their business. I asked them, who did the mechira? So they said, there's a rabbi out west who they paid him a lot of money. And he sold their business for a down payment of $5 to the janitor that takes care of his meisid. So that's a joke. That's what it's called. So I asked him, you couldn't find you couldn't find a Rav locally? Is the only one who knows the halachas is somebody out west? So, a heta mechira means that you do a mechira that's real. A mechira that's real means that you give them a real share in your company, a share of your profits. So you see, if you want to make profit off of Shabbos, we're not supposed to be making profit off of Shabbos. So you have to be willing to give away the profits of Shabbos Tagoy, because we're not supposed to be doing malacha on Shabbos. But the mechira has to be something that's real. For example, I'll give one example. If you have a way of dividing your profits in 7 ways, you have a big company, you make, $700,000 a year. So a seventh, or a little more than a seventh of the year is Shabbos Kodesh. So if you'd be willing to do a mechira to a guy, where the guy is purchasing the business for Shabbos, and maybe it's performance-based, it means that based on the performance of the business, the forecasted performance of the business on Shabbos, he's willing to buy the business for 90% of what the profits are forecasted to be. So, and he gives a down payment, and maybe the rest of the price gets paid up by the income that comes in on Shabbos. So that's a good deal for him. He's paying 90%, he's walking away with 10%, he has to do very little. So that's maybe a mechira that has substance to it. A shaila, how you can make a mechira chal every week and go on and off and back and forth, so that you have to speak to the competent place how to structure that. But the point is that a mechira for Shabbos has to be real. That's a davar pashut. It's mavur in all the paiskim that having businesses work on Shabbos was always a b'diavad. It was always b'diavad, and it was also shas chak, and it was because of the doiche kapanasa. So the question is being asked by a person who had a business. The business expanded, and because of that, they have to work on Shabbos. So the business expanded. The Rebbe Shalom gave you an enormous amount of bracha. So you say, Rebbe Shalom, I'm going to reward you for the bracha that I'm going to start working on Shabbos. Thank you, Rebbe Shalom. That's the thank you to Rebbe Shalom. You have to know that if the Rebbe Shalom is mashpia bracha on you, it means that you're supposed to be downsizing your work. And you have to find a way to overcome the Yetzer Hara to stay open on Shabbos. And that's the emes. That's the davar pashut. I think Rabbi Roth is masking 100%. I want to be myself one other thing. There's a Yeshuas Yaakov. And it's kedai to know this. The Yeshuas Yaakov says a chiddush. The Gemara says that two malachim accompany a person home on Leil Shabbos. And one malach is a malach tov. And one malach is a malach ra. And if he finds the home Shabbos dik, the malach tov gives a bracha, ken yeh the Shabbos haba, malach ra ino bal korcha. And if he finds the home unkept, so the malach ra says, ken yeh the Shabbos haba, malach tov ino bal korcha. I steht in Gemara. The shaila is, who are these two malachim? What are these two malachim? So some say it's the weekday malachim that accompany you every day. You're supposed to say before you go to the bathroom, "Eskabdu b'chubadim." Some say it's the vachadik malachim go out, and the Shabbos malachim coming in. That's what some say. Reb Henkin, Zechariah Levacha, said that. But the Yeshua Yaakov says different. He says al pi chachmas astronomy. Al pi astronomy, he says Shabbos is a yoyim klola. This is what he writes. And he says the malach HaMemunah on Shabbos is the malach of hashchasa and klala and kalkala. It's a malach of destruction and devastation. And he says al piteva, things that happen, things that people do on Shabbos are not matzliach. And he says the malach toiv is the malach of Friday. The end of every tkufa is the strongest. The malach toiv, the malach of bracha, is the malach of Erev Shabbos. Misha tarach be'erev Shabbos yechel b'Shabbos. And the malach ra is the malach of Shabbos, who's the malach of klala. And he says al piteva, things that are done on Shabbos be'etzem are not mali bracha. And the only way you could be mahapich that klala bracha is by preparing for Shabbos and having the Shabbos be a Shabbos. And so that's important to keep in mind. The more we make sure to keep our Shabbos Shabbos, the more you're taking, you're transforming the koyach of the malach ra into the koyach of the malach tov. And the hapich is chalila lahapich. Nobody's marviach from Shabbos. That's the mitzias. So it's kedai to tell this person who asked the question that I hope he has a good Rav, and I hope he has a good Rabbi who will tell him, will advise him, your business grew, so keep it grown during the week. And Shabbos, you keep it shut.
What achrayas does an employer have to an employee in hashkafic matters? For example, sending an employee to a conference or to a meeting where there is minimal structure, minyanim, or setting up an employee with devices that are not filtered. What is the employee's achrayas if an employer asks him to do something that the employee does not feel is hashkafically correct?
I want to ask another question. What's the employer's responsibility to an employee if he sends him to a nuclear site? Does he have to send him with the right suit? Or can he say, you know what, his wife will become almana, so I'll deal with it afterwards, I'll figure it out, maybe go to insurance. What do you mean, what's his responsibility? He's Jewish, his responsibility is don't put your employees in a place that you know they're gonna fall. If he has to listen to you and he's going to a place that you know that the chances are he's going to fall, then if you send him there, you're not allowed to send him there. Unfortunately, we get to hear such stories all the time. The workplace for the Frum Yid is the biggest Mokam Michshel Frum Yidden. More, I don't like to say this, but more than the internet. The Frum work environment becomes tremendous Mokam of Michshel for a lot of Frum Yidden. So our employer, his obligation is not to send him to places that he knows that it's a Michshel, and not to have his office itself shouldn't be a place that he's Molo Michshel. He should run an office that's the Gidr Atznias are good. He shouldn't make all kinds of normal takonis and the whole thing that people should be able to be able to keep themselves. Someone wants to be a Elachid. The person doesn't want to be a Elachid, okay? But a person wants to be a Elachid shouldn't find that every day he wakes up and he has no bread, he's put into circumstances where he can't. And a person shouldn't do to somebody else what he wouldn't want to do to himself. And that the employer is asking this question means he has epis Yerushalayim, doesn't want it to happen to him. So when his employees is different than him, he doesn't want it to happen to him. So how could he do this? It gives him unfiltered internet. Fine. So it gives the person unfiltered internet. So I know, and I think everybody in this room, if he wants to be Moed al Emes, knows that 95% of the people, 97% of the people who have unfiltered internet already saw things that they shouldn't. So what is he doing? I'll tell you a story that happened to me. I was once on a din Torah. I was about din Torah. And we had attorneys, a little waspy attorneys, real, a little Choshen attorneys. Each one was getting, I don't know, $1,500 an hour. These. And there were two guys they were representing Yidden and the Torah. It came the break. They were taking a shtickle break. So the Dayanim took out, we call them the stupid phones, these batlonim like me. This phone, sure. So all the Dayanim took out the same phone. So these attorneys, it wasn't the first time they were there. They were there already a few sessions, and they knew that the Dayanim are not such batlonim. They're not stupid, the cave people they didn't know what's going on. They saw that. So they turned around and said, "Rabbis, what is this? What is this? What's with you guys? Still have flip phones. What happened to you?" Sure. So all the Dayanim were like sheepishly, we're going to tell a guy. So I was a mechutziv. I told the guy, "Can I ask you a question?" "Yeah." So how many people in America watch, I don't want to say the word out of my mouth, to the guy I said it, bakzen. How many people watch stuff that's, really bad? So he told me, I don't know, 80%, I don't know, some crazy percent. So I told him, that's why I have this phone. So a friend asked him, "You trust yourself?" So one attorney was smart enough to keep quiet. The other one said, "No, I don't know." So I said, "That's why I have such a phone, because I don't trust myself." So you trust other people? On whose cheshbon? On what cheshbon? So it's pashut that every employer is obligated to make sure, again, you're not his policeman. People could be atzeres, but not to put him in a situation where you have to be a malach. I'm not a malach. Maybe you think that your employee is a malach, but if he's a malach, then you could also do what says Eliyahu Novi did. He said, doesn't have to work, he just downs the boshtem and malachim come down and they finish the binyan. But if you want him to work and you're an employee, you got to make sure that he's not in a mokum that's all to be nichshel. If the employee finds himself in such a situation, again, he's an employee for Yemen, but if he knows that he's going to be oiva atzeres, he's not allowed to go. And Moshe has a tshuva, it's a guy who traveled with the train. He says, if you know that you have problems, you're not allowed to go. A person is mechuyev to give up, the oiva atzeres, he's mechuyev to give up his hope on those every dollar he has, not to be oiva atzeres. Avada, a person has to talk to his local Roth exactly what's together, when, where, what, but that's, otherwise, he can't keep such a job. There's also a mordige bezilzel in this, and people have to, with Hilchos yichud in the place where people work, they have to make sure that there's no yichud there. It's a tremendous mixture. It's very hard. Many times you have to set up your office in a way that there shouldn't be mechsholim. You have to speak to Rabbi to make sure, because this scenario, all these things is the obligation of the employer.
There's a concept of Yad Ba'el Kiyad Balabayis. Yad Ba'el Kiyad Balabayis means that even if normally we attribute halachas to shlichus, shluchas shel adam kamaisai, you send a shliach, there's a din that your shliach is kamaisai. A poil is stronger than that. Rabbi Kivega brings a Machna Ephraim. Rabbi Kivega. By Hilchos Maika. You have a guy put up a Maika. He puts up a rail on your porch. In a place where it's chayva bracha, normally a guy can't be a shliach. But Rabbi Kivega says, B'Shem Machna Ephraim, that yad poil ki yad balabayis can make, that you could make a bracha on a goyish shliach, putting a goyish worker putting up a maika. A shaila, if we pass like that, la'aloch anah. But the point is that a poil, the yad poil ki yad balabayis may be stronger than a regular shliach. And typically we say, Divir Rav, Divir Talmud, Divir Mishayimim, Ein shliach l'dvar aveira, and maybe it would be the responsibility of the poil. You shouldn't go to a trade show in Vegas, or wherever it may be. But if an employer is paying an employee, and say yad pel ki yad balabayis, so maybe divrei Rav, divrei Talmud, divrei Mishayim wouldn't apply, and you'd be held liable. This avad lifnei iver, some would say it's lifnei delifnei, but it's a davar pasha by me where an employee feels compelled to do something. It's a real question of lifnei iver. I want to just. Shailaf is lifnei bayid, it's true. But I want to be Ma'aseh just two Ma'asehs that I had by my Rabbi, Rishmul, our Rabbi, the Yeshiva Shlita. The Yeshiva often would say that the workplace, Rabbi Roth said there's Hamakom Michshel. The Yeshiva would often say the workplace Hamakom Sakana. And it is like that. It's a Makam Sakana. I was zeicha to sit by the Yeshiva for 20 years in his office, and we would learn in the morning and learn in the afternoon, and an hour after Mincha he would take phone calls. And many times people would come to the office also with issues. I can't tell you how many times we got shilas which are not things that you can even speak about publicly between boss and employee. After hours, Achman al-Islam, when everybody left the office, you can't imagine the sakanas. And I feel Goyim understand this. I feel even Goyim understand that there's a sakana and that there's a need to protect oneself from it. There was a famous court case in 2013. There was a dentist in Iowa in his 50s who hired an assistant. She was in her 30s. And over the years, as is the derech, he didn't have any shaykhs to her. But over the years, he developed a relationship. And after a while, he was steeped in a very illicit relationship with an assistant 20 years his junior. Because when you work with somebody every day, it collaboration and cooperation and shared goals, and of course conversation, leads to things. It's not shayach on them, and that's not in a matzah yichud dafka. And the dentist's wife got involved, and she got her pastor, but she got her pastor together with him. They worked, and they prevailed upon the dentist to fire this worker. And so she sued. She said it's gender discrimination. You can't sue me. It's gender discrimination. And the case made its way up to the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court in Iowa, and they ruled that the boss was justified because it's a sakana. Not gender discrimination, it's causing personal harm. And so even Einam Yehudim understand this concept. And that's why there are safeguards in Jewish offices, Yiddish, Yisrael Kadoshim. They make safeguards that they don't refer to Noshim by the first name, which is the right thing. I know a Yid who proudly bucked this trend, and he said, no, in our office, we're going to call them by their first names. They're people just like everyone else. And he was matzliach for a while, and lo yaleinu, he ended up in very deep trouble. and he ended up, his business went down in disgrace because Osher v'loi b'mishpat v'chatzi yomav ya'azvenu v'acharisa yeh. And so we have to know that it's not that they're not people. We have to have safeguards. We have to put up guardrails for ourselves. Rabbi Roth mentioned before that people don't trust themselves. I want to tell you a ma'aseh that happened with me. I was married 1 year, and my wife got a job, and it entailed having internet. I didn't want to have internet in the house. Went to Shmuel, and the Yeshiva said we should have internet, but he said two things. You have to get a filter. This is 25 years ago. You have to get a filter, and he said that on top of that, your wife needs to make a password on the computer that you shouldn't know. And he said, and even when the computer's open, you have to makabel never to use a computer with internet. I was a little bit surprised how strong he was. Shmuel is considered normal. So I was taken aback. And I looked at the Yeshiva and said, the Yeshiva's chayshid me? He gave me his piercing stare that could burn us 2 holes straight through you. And he said, I'm chayshid everybody. And every person has to know this. Ein apotropos larayis. Yosef Atzadik worked for a boss. Vayavo yabayso lasis malachtoi. Lasis malachtoi. Vayavo yabayso lasis malachtoi. Yosef Atzadik. And everything hung in the balance. And Yosef Atzadik, Rachman al-San, found himself in a makom nesayin. And what did he do? He had to give up his job, taka. And not stam, he had to give up his job, he ended up in jail. And the halacha is like that. The halacha is chayav odam litin kol mamaynan. A person is obligated to give up everything they own. Everything they own. You know what everything you own means? Your house. Mechuyev to be homeless. Maybe a mila to be homeless. But you have to give up everything you own. Your car, your house, your bank account, everything. Penniless. Not to be over on one lois asay. It sounds like a chumrah, but it's in the regular version of Shulchan Aruch. You could look it up. Chayav adam litin kol mamaynan. And so if a person finds themselves in a massive of Nisayan, the halacha is that you're mechuyev to give it up. I would advise such an employee that you should have a discussion with your boss. Have an open discussion. Go to your boss like a mensch and say, I don't feel comfortable doing this. It's too hard for me. I feel vulnerable. It's not something that I'm capable of doing. Maybe we should ask a shayla if it's kedai. You don't have to tell your boss what to do, but you can ask your boss, b'derech shayla, b'derech eretz. Maybe there's a way that we can find a workable solution. Maybe you can hire someone else to go. A guy. I don't know if you're allowed to put a guy in a matzu sakanas. Shav mitzvah nayach. Abral chapanim. But you should have an open conversation with your boss. And the boss has to know that you can't build a business that way. A mensch davis in the Peliyayitz writes in multiple places, in Erech Masomatan, and in other places as well. The Peliyayitz writes that it's inconceivable that HaKadosh Baruch Hu pays people for doing the wrong thing. And it's inconceivable that HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes away people's money for doing the right thing. It's inconceivable. That's the greatest avla that could exist. Imagine, you're a Rabbi Shalom, you have people who you contract to do something, and you punish them for doing the right thing, and you pay them for doing the wrong thing. It's inconceivable. The Rabbeinu Shalom is Kel Amuna Vein Ovel Tzadik V'Yashiru. Could it be that such a thing? Could it be that Rabbeinu Shalom would pay somebody, would reward somebody for doing the wrong thing, and would cancel a person, would knas a person, would fine a person for doing the right thing? It's inconceivable. It's the greatest avon that exists. And the answer is that these are nisyanis. These are tests. And on the other side of a nisyan, you always find bracha. And I'll end with a story. My own daughter. My daughter was engaged and she was having trouble finding a job. And today her husband's learning, and today to live you have to, where a wife works. Noshim Tzidkani is a Klal Yisrael. They want to support their husband's learning. And she was engaged for 2 months, having a hard time finding a job. Finally she was offered a job, a gewaldige job, with a nice salary. And she did some research. I told her you have to do research on the job. She did research and she found out that the boss has a shita that there should be a friendly family environment in the office. And so men and women, they work in the same, in one office. They have the women on one side and then on the other side. But some people said there were conversations that went on that were crossed the line maybe. And she asked me what to do. Ich habe eine Gies, because whatever she doesn't earn, I have to understand. I don't do wealth management yet. So I didn't hesitate. I told her that I have no suffix, it's an assignment. And I don't know if the Rebbe will test you that you won't find a job before you're married, but I have no suffix you're going to find a better job. I don't know when it will come. Maybe it will come in a month, maybe it will come in a year, maybe it will come in 6 months, I don't know. Amol and Sionis come with pain, but I have no suffix you'll find a better job. So she turned down the job. And 2 weeks before her chasana, 2 weeks later, she was offered a job in a company where the whole office is 5 women, and the salary was $10,000 better. And so you have to know that when you do the right thing and you bite the bullet, l'chvoid shamayim, l'chvoid HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If a person says, Rabbeinu Shalom, it's inconceivable that you reward people for doing the wrong thing. It's inconceivable that I'm going to do something for kvoid shamayim and I'm going to get fined for it. It's not possible. It's an avla. Forget about anything else. It's simply an avla. You don't have to be a navi for this. Peliyetz writes this. Shmuel Salan said he wrote his whole sefer with Ruach HaKodesh. But it's inconceivable. And for doing the right thing, the Rabbi Shalom benches a person. So if we have that attitude, then this employee wouldn't go to the trade show and maybe have a speak with his boss. And maybe the boss would also be decided to do the right thing.
I have it from a business partner. Due to occasional cash flow issues, I sometimes fund company expenses using my personal credit card. The company reimburses me for both the principal and the interest charges. What are the biggest concerns with this arrangement, and is it possible to sign a heter Iska retroactively?
Good luck. If someone borrows money on a credit card of somebody else, let's say just as a Muslim, I have a credit card and so my friend wants to borrow money and he wants to use my credit card and he'll pay the Karen and he'll pay the ribbis. So that's the ribbis that I said. Why? Because the understanding is that since the bank, when they're lending the money to the credit card holder, means the one whose name is on the credit card, and they're charging him ribbis. So if he takes that money and he gives it to his friend to borrow, so basically his friend is borrowing money from him, and he's borrowing it al tonight to pay the ribbis that he has to pay the bank, the credit card company, and paying up the ribbis that I have to pay the credit card company is a way of paying me ribbis. So you don't have to actually give me the money. If you give somebody else the money on my behalf, it's as if you gave me the money, and therefore, it's alva beribis ksutze. Ja over 5 laven. Ganz geschmack. There was one time all I eat, there was a maskel. It was a maskel of Pinsk. I was up with the joke. The maskel of Pinsk. And the maskell of Minsk went to visit the maskell of Pinsk. He went to visit him, showed up in his house, and he saw that his makbi doesn't eat bugs. So he asked the maskell, "Stand you're a maskell?" He says, "Yeah, I'm a maskell." So why don't you eat? What's the problem with? So he says, "For 5 lav and a pop, I could do better." Son, 5 lav for this year, this being. Now listen, who's over the lav? The one who did the favor. The one who got the favor, he's only over 3 lav. So, side the borrower is over lav, side the malva is over lav. So you can't give your credit card to somebody else. So now, what happens if I use my credit card in the business? And the business pays back this credit card. So what happens if, let's say, there's a shortfall in the business? Does somebody have to bring money from his pocket? Someone have to take money out of his pocket? If both partners have to take money out of his pocket, So that means that not only did I lend the money business, I also lended this person privately because he's achroi personally to pay back this thing. So then there's no question, this is ribis tzutza. If you make up clearly that the person doesn't have to take it out of his pocket, then starts all kinds of questions. First you have it at Moshe, who holds that there's no personal, that there's not ribis, many argue on this. There's also a taz in Kufayin that has a kula when you borrow, and there's like probably 3 drachim d'achroinim how to learn this taz, whether it applies to this case or not. So there'd be complications, but definitely one cannot be soymach l'chatchila on doing this, and one should be making a iske for such a situation. If he didn't, so now he has a shayv with the emet, so then he has to find out exactly what happened. Did he have personally? Because the default is that you do have personal liability. If you don't have, then there may be enough things here to maybe figure it out. You have to ask the Roth who will deal with this. But when you need a iske, doing a iske backwards is basically like saying like this, and I want to figure out backwards how I ate yesterday. And it's hard to eat today. I eat yesterday from today. The only thing we have, mekam v'la'abol mafrei, is some kind of lomdus and luchas, haforos nedorim. But there's no such thing as doing ahead to iske backwards. Let me explain, and just in case, stam kedai, once we have the oil of what ahead to iske is. Because if people would know what ahead to iske is, first they realize it doesn't work backwards, but also maybe would realize that half the time to use ahead to iske doesn't really work. So let's talk a minute what ahead to iske is. Ahead to iske, there's some people that think that it means that there was a mola yid who found money on the floor. He said, found money on the floor, and he said, Shabbos ahin, Shabbos aheh, and he picked it up and put it in his pocket. Shabbos doesn't go away. You can't make Shabbos go away. Ribbis, you can't write a paper and a kameya that says there's not going to be ribbis. It doesn't work. Ribbis is ribbis. The Torah asks is ribbis. Ahet iske is a very, very interesting concept. The Torah clearly doesn't want ribbis. But we came up with a trick how to mimic ribbis. Now, the reason why they made this trick is because it was simply not possible. There was kufas, mamash and class, it was not possible. And even till today, it's pretty difficult. The people today that don't make het iskes usually over ribbis their eyes. So I know there's people that say, don't do het iske. I don't do iskes. Whoever tells you that, tell him you should come visit me. I'm going to show you how this Yid, if he's a koilinger man, and he doesn't have a mortgage, doesn't have money in the bank, and he sits at home, gewaldig. But if he does a sokim, and he doesn't do het iske, it means he's probably doing ribbis tzutze. Or at least ribbis d'rabbanan. That's the fact.
All cash.
More cash. Rabbi Yashiv said that even Talmidei Chachamim that didn't learn Hilchos ribbis, they're going to come up Shemaim, they're going to get petch because most of them are Hilchos ribbis. I speak to Rabbanim and Rosh Yeshivas and Koilim Galayit, and they're Hilchos ribbis because they don't know. So a person has to know Hilchos ribbis is a you have to get a certain kind of brain. You have to learn how to think like Hilchos ribbis. Start thinking about finding everything to be kept because Hilchos ribbis is very Monsey. But Ahet Iske basically works. The concept of Ahet Iske is that you're really considered not a malva and the other person is a loiva, not a borrower and a lender, but you're considered a investor and the other person is giving you profits. That's the concept. To go into all the pratim is difficult, but a typical Ahet Iske is divided in two. Half the money is considered a loan, and half the money is considered an investment. Now, I just want to point out, if half the money is a loan and half the money is an investment, you only can make profits, though, from the half that's an investment. Because on a loan, you can't take any additional money. That's ribbis. So let's say you write out Iska for 18%. I'm just giving you a motion. Yeah, because I see these atzeres flying around. Yeah, atzeres for 18%. That means that the person who's taking that atzeres is going to give a 36% return. If you find such an investment, run as fast as you can. Do not invest. Who makes 36% on their money? Nobody. So really, it's a atzeres that's faulty from day one. It's not a atzeres that really works. I consider it pretty much ribbis. It's not atzeres. Atzeres means that, again, so if you make it cooler pekat, okay, there's all kinds of maybe tricks. But what it means is that you're making profits. This person is investing it, and he's making profits. And from the profits, he's paying you. So let's say I charge you a point at the initiation of the loan. It doesn't work without this. Because how could I give you a point now if there was no profits? It didn't make any profits yet. So how do you do it? You have to come up with another trick. But for everything, there's an atzeres maybe, or some things there's an atzeres, but you got to know it. So atzeres is not a magic, it's an investment. So can I figure out today how to write an atzeres today, and somehow the money that you already gave me from before are considered profits from what today? It's pretty. If you can figure out how to make such an investment, I'm assuming a lot of people want to invest with you. There's no such thing. So to give backwards atzeres, there may be other atzeres how to do it. I'm not going to go now and sit and explain how, but if you have such a situation, you could try to talk to a Roth who knows and is a bug to see if there's a way to somehow help. But the poshut thing, if a person already did it, he has to be moichel all the ribbis. If the loan's already a closed loan, that means the loan's already paid back, everything's paid back, it's just a question that you took also the ribbis, then the loiva has a right to be moichel. You could just say, I'm moichel. But if it's still an open loan, then you can't do that atzeres, and you're going to have to swallow the loss. The simple answer is going to have to swallow the loss. All that ribbis is going to come off of the cheshbon of the one who was his credit card. So Rabbi say, start paying attention to Hilchos ribbis. It's all over the place. Everything you do from back to front is more of a Hilchos ribbis. So you have to be very, very cognizant, and maybe taka gedai just for that to write at the Iska Kloli, even though it's questionable, but at least to have it in the back. There should exist such a thing that every person should have what they call it at this. Come again, talk to your local rabbi, he'll help you.
3 short points. We're up against the clock. Number one, I really think that, to paraphrase Rabbi Roth, it's a shame that Heter Iska is called Heter Iska. People think it's a halachic document. It's not. It's Iska. That's all it is. It is an Iska. You're not being matter anything. If you invest some money with somebody, it's mutter. It's an investment. If it's not an investment, it's alva, it's Osher. So it's really not Heter Iska. It is an Iska. It's very little Heter and very much Iska. And I really, in the day and age of marketing and branding, I think it would be gewaldic if we'd be able to brand Heter Iska, rebrand it as just Iska, like the Iska Summit. It should have said Heter Iska Summit. But it's Iska, that's all it is.
The reason why they don't call it Iska is because it has a couple of tricks.
They better run away.
That they added to the Iska, and that's why it's called Heter Iska, because without that, no one would consider it an Iska.
Nobody would do it either. That's number one. The second point is about doing what we call a Heter Iska L'Mafreyas. I just want to add one nakud over here, and that is as follows. In the event that it was understood from minute one that this was an Iska, an investment, meaning that this was not a loan, there was no personal guarantee, there was risk on all sides, and it was simply a regular loan, it was simply a regular Iska, I apologize, and just they forgot to write it. So then, there's a makom to say that if you forgot to write it, good, but it was really an Iska from day one. And there are cases like that. Now, if you have loan documents, which is ksiva, davar kosav, ashtar, so a verbal understanding can't trump that. And maybe over there you wouldn't be able to go back and reclassify it. even if you meant that, because you have a shtar that says it's alva, that's a shayla. In this case, if it's not written anywhere that this was the arrangement, so maybe it's davar shabal peh, so maybe if this was the understanding from the beginning, if they intended to formulate as an iska, so possibly that's not called going back to mafreya. But that brings us to our third point, and that is the whole question of doing a heter iska on credit card interest. There's no shayla that credit, I shouldn't say there's no shayla, the pashtus is credit card interest is ribis, in the event that the person who is benefiting is liable for the interest as well. And some suggest that maybe you should write a heter iska. So I just want to point out that credit card interest is extremely high. And that brings us to the oimik, the depth of Rabbi Roth's other point, and that is that to the degree that most heter iskas are meant to be chatzi milva v'chatzi pekadon, so if you take a credit card interest which is 14% or 17%, so ultimately you're ending up, it's chatzi milva chatzi pekadon. That means there's a 34% interest rate on the credit card debt. And that's exceedingly high. There's no heter iska that would work for that. I was once giving a shiur locally in Flatbush, and I said that hard money loans, where people do it for 15% or 12%, 15%, 18%, I said it outright. I said, I think it's ribis. Unless you have mamish an investment on the table that has those returns. And most of the time it's chatzi milva chatzi pekadon. So you're talking about rates of 30% plus. And I said it's ribis. So there's a fellow there who got very angry, and he used to come by a little bit, and I didn't see him for 8 months. He called me up after 8 months, he asked me if I noticed he wasn't around. Even if I didn't notice, I said I did. I noticed every year. And he asked me, do you know why? I said, don't know why. And he said, because you said that I'm a malva beribis, because I do hard money loans. And I had said that heter iska doesn't work. So he said, I have a heter iska for every single one. And you declared that I'm a malva beribis. So I told him I didn't know what he does. Taka didn't know what he does. So I said, I didn't mean to be mevazi you publicly. Maybe I should have said it quieter. But it is ribis. What should I do? Every yid is ohuv, aval ha'emes ohuv yoser mikael. And you have to know this. The metzius is that many of these deals, the hard money loans, and the cash advances, and many of the other things that people do when you're doing a tayyid, is ribis, and no heter iska in the world can help. And it's very important to be aware of this. You have to have a Rav that you ask shaylas to who knows the halachas inside out. I recommend Rabbi Roth very highly. And you have to have a Rav who really knows the halachas inside out and backwards. Midap wissen abaisai. That a malva beribis nechasa mismaitetin. It's a sakana. The Gemara says like that. That a person's malva beribis, their panas dwindles over time. And the Peliyot says that this money infects the other money. That's what he says. It's like an infection that spreads. So we should all be zeichet to keep the dinim of ribis. Kitzurasa.
Last question. Baruch Hashem, those of us here are making an effort to address potential halachic concerns in our business. What is the current state of observance in our community regarding heter iska, Shabbos compliance, and all other halachic issues? And what message should we bring back to those in our friends in our community who are not here today?
I'm not sure what the question is.
Closing statement.
Okay. I think that I think that Klal Yisrael is definitely more aware in the last few years to a lot of potential issues, Sayin Shabbos and Sayin Hilchos Ribos. I think a lot of people are definitely more aware than the generation before them. I think that the nisyonos of our generation are a lot. People feel a tremendous amount of pressure to make a tremendous amount of money. They feel desperation, and desperate people do desperate things. But Im Kol Zeh, Klal Yisrael, I think, is doing better. I don't think that the message should come out that Klal Yisrael is not doing good. The fact that people get together on Azah Memorial Day, they're sitting here and listening to me darshan instead of having a good time, Ich stelle sich vor, there's more fun things to do this afternoon than sit and listen to me. Im Kol Zeh, Klal Yisrael is here, and they're listening, and they want to do better. Can we do even better? 100%. Will we do Emet Hashem better? All of us. Emet Hashem. We're all going to do better. What we need to do is start. I know that most people, they have a share. They learn Daf HaYomi, they learn this limud and that limud. But very few people spend time learning Hilchos Shabbos. And I'm not talking about only Hilchos Shabbos that are negaya to the chveizvos, to the opening the cans. Ask him. You have to learn all Hilchos Shabbos. But for businesses, people don't realize that being in business means you have no dalach chelkei shechanor. It's not a joke. You really have to know. So why don't we make it a mission? Everyone should start learning a little bit the Hilchos Shabbos that's negaya, Hilchos Amir L'Nochrim. Get a good sefer, a kitzah sefer. Try to learn it a little bit be'iyun. And the Rabbi Salant already said that when you learn something be'iyun, it brings to more zehirus. You keep it more. Hilchos Ribbis, I think that people that work are able to know Hilchos Ribbis much better than people that are besmedish. Why? If you talk to a person who's in the business world and is doing finance, he comes up with almost every eitzah that Chazal said is also al taromis ribbis and al avak ribbis. What I couldn't even figure out why Chazal asked it, he figured already how to do that trick. Why? Because they say desperation is the mother of all invention. When you know there's a ribbis and you got to come up with eitzahs, they come up with plans, with shilas. And I say, Mamish, you're to the Chavas Das. Look at that. This is Mamish. Why? So you could become Bekiyim in Hilchos Ribbis. How? By dedicating yourself. Learn Hilchos Ribbis. Learn Hilchos Yichud. There's so much that a little bit every day a person should spend time. Chazal say, Al tikra alichas ela alochos. Kol hashoyin alochos b'chol yoyim muftach l'shemaran haba. Once heard from the visions of Rebbe, once said, made a siyum, he said, Kol hashoyin alochos b'chol yoyim muftach l'shemaran. So we think it's some kind of school. He says, no, hashoyin alochos b'chol yoyim is telling me you'll keep them. If you'll keep them, you'll be a ben olam haba. But if you don't learn the halachas, you won't even know what you're doing. It's not possible. Like the Chavetz Chaim said, if you learn Hilchos Shabbos, everyone's over Hilchos Shabbos. If you learn Hilchos Ribbis, you're over Hilchos Ribbis. And if you learn Hilchos Yichud, you're over Hilchos Yichud. That's just the facts of life. So we have to start. And the Metzshem, they're going to organize another few shiurim, bring another few speakers in Metzshem. The Am is going to come, and they're going to learn. But every person should give himself takish. He shouldn't only come out of this, I do this wrong, I do that wrong. No, I do everything right. From today on, I'm doing everything right. I learned, I want to learn, I want to grow. And I'm at Hashem, your will, Aleiva Atzliach, should keep all the mitzvahs. Chasam Soifa says in Birchas Kahamim, we ask the Boin Shloim, they should give us panose, beheta v'loi be'isa. So the Chasam Soifa says, well, if it's beheta, it's not be'isa. What does it mean beheta v'loi be'isa? So the Chasam Soifa, it should be beheta on shtiklich teure. The shtiklich teure, it's a very shaila for the isa. You have to say, no, it's a zasot heta. That doesn't have any tzadis in it. I wish I give you all a broche you should have beheta v'loi be'isa.
What's the state of affairs in our communities? So it's a hard question. I'd like to divide it into three groups. There are some people who keep all the halachas, very zoya. They keep all the halachas, they're very, very makbid. There's a tiny minority, which I don't think we're speaking to today, who simply don't care, a tiny minority. The overwhelming majority of people want to do right, and they're looking to do right. Yisrael Kedoshim Haim. And that's the Metzias. And like Rabbi Roth said, it's impossible to do right if you don't know the halachas. But the Olam wants to do right. And so if you have a kohol of people, a community, a tzibur, who are looking to do good and are trying to do good. So that's Shomer Torah mitzvahs. Somebody asked me, how do you expect a bar mitzvah bacher? A 13-year-old boy to keep Kol Torah Kulam. He doesn't know Dalach Chalke Shulchan Aruch. It's not shaykh. When bar mitzvah bacher would come to Rosh Shmuel for a bracha, he would always say the same thing. Come on. He would take the boy's hand and he would say, do you understand that tomorrow you're going to have the same achrayas, the same responsibility as an 80-year-old man? That's an incredible statement. It's a very, very scary thought. But it's not. Because the expectation of a bar mitzvah bacher is not to become Reb Chaim Kanievsky overnight. The expectation is that you begin a journey where your dream is to become that model yid, that Shomer Torah mitzvahs. You embark on a mission that I am going to be the role model whom everybody else emulates. And I believe that state of affairs in Klal Yisrael is very high. Most people want to do good. And even when you tell a person, Sashai Levribis, Ashai Lev Shabbos, Lefnei Iver, Machalas Asuris, Yichud, Echveis, Ani HaMa'apech B'Charora, and it's about, even when you Meir Shailas and people don't do it, it's not because they don't want to do it. And many times they think the rabbi is too strict. So he's probably being machmer on me. But some people want to do good, and people are looking to do good. And like the Rav said, this asifa is the biggest raya to it. People could be sitting and enjoying, and instead they're coming and putting their kaiches into learning a little more. Nobody came here to find out what they're doing right, I'm sure about that. Everybody came to find out what they could do better. And so that's a gewaldige madrega. So what's the message we bring back to our communities? I don't believe there's any more important message than one, and that is Aseh L'cho Rav. Rabbi say, I'm sure every successful person, I'm sure every person here who runs a business or is involved in a business knows that there are lawyers and accountants and auditors and actuaries and all sorts of things involved in a business. Why? Just in case, that's why. And they have him on retainer and they pay him pretty penny. I don't understand why we don't have a structure in Klal Yisrael where there's an organization of Rabbanim, Yoshvei al Medin, B'kiyim Ba'alacha, who maybe could use a parnasa, Talmidei Chachamim, B'nei Torah, or Isaac in Choshen Mishpat, Yeridei as well, or Chaim as well. Emes a Talmidei Chachamim, who should be on every single business should have them on their roster. Have them on payroll. Instead of hiring an extra lawyer, an extra attorney, an extra executor, an extra CFO, or whoever it may be, instead of hiring an extra manager, you have a Rav, who you could turn to with every shaila, regardless. And that would be an incredible tikkun. And I believe that that's something that every person should have in all areas of life, Aseh L'cho Rav. Rav Shmuel Shlita always says, he would say it by Shalom Bayis questions and answers, and by Chinuch questions and answers, that the key to Hatzlacha in life is Aseh L'cho Rav. Because if a husband and a wife have a Rav that they consult, and that's muskim by them, and not that they come to the Rav and the Rav tells them what they don't want to hear, so they argue with him. Unless you're willing to accept even after arguing. I have by me a balabas, he argues with everything I say. But afterwards he agrees. L'maiseh, he does what I tell him to do. And so when he apologizes for being pushy, I tell him, just like when my kids are pushy, it doesn't bother me. If you're like a child, that doesn't bother me. I don't view him like a child, but he's like an eigene kind. And so that doesn't bother me. Accuse that. Push back as much as you want. But Aseh L'cho Rav. And if it's Aseh L'cho Rav, you have a machlokes with your wife, Aseh L'cho Rav, he'll always side with your wife. But you'll be happy at least. In chinuch, Aseh L'cho Rav, you'll have a shaila. You go to a Rav, he takes achrayus, and he has a siyata d'shmaya. In business, it's the same thing. Aseh L'cho Rav. And you may get a Rav, the Rav you choose may once give you a chumrah that you feel is outlandish. He may tell you, be makbid on this, don't do it. And you should know a lot of times that chumrah is coming more from a hergish that he feels there's a siyata d'shmaya that a Rav has. When you're saimach on a Rav, they have a siyata d'shmaya. A bazunder is siyata d'shmaya. Shmuel's a Litvak. The quintessential Litvak, is that right? If Rabbi Roth wanted to learn to Philadelphia, he'd be wearing a shtreimel today. So this is through the Rosh Hashiva's Litvishkeit. But the Rosh Hashiva is the quintessential Litvak. He told me multiple times that he believes all the Maisim with the Rebbes, all the Maisim with the Maisim with the Rebbes. V'yazai. Why? As Rosh Hashiva told me like this. There's a concept of siyata d'shmaya. When you're saimach on somebody 100%, the Rabbeinu Shalom made in Klal Yisrael that there's a musig of a Talmud asking a Rebbe, Klal Yisrael Shalom B'Zkeinim. The Rabbeinu Shalom gave us that structure. We go back to the Yisayid of the Peliyot, Volt Given an Avla. It would be Pashut, an Avla of epic proportions if the Rabbeinu Shalom didn't send them a siyata d'shmaya. And that's why Hanoitel Eitzam and Askeinim Eina Nichshal Oilam. Azaka means Zeh Shekonu Chachma. And so when you ask a Rav a Shaila, you should know if it's a Rav that you're saimach on, that you really rely on, and you're willing to rely on him. A lot of times you'll ask him a Shaila, he'll give you an answer. How about the Mekenzach Mekel sign? Yeah, maybe. But he's giving you the answer that he feels is right for you. And so in business, the best advice, the best message we should bring back to our communities is, Asay L'chor Rav. Every single business should make it their business today to find a Rav that you can bring on board. And a Rav that you should put him on retainer, you should hire him, you should pay him. Many Choshen Rabbanim don't want to take money, so then you have no eitzah, you have to find someone else. But you take someone who you're willing to literally put your money where your mouth is, and you pay him, and every shayla goes through him. And not just every shayla, every deal that you have even if you don't have a shayla, you give it to a lawyer to look over, you give it to an accountant to look over, you give it to some business advisor to look over, everybody in the company looks it over, the Rav should look it over too. He's looking it over for shaylas. And that's the best message we could bring back, because it's impossible for all of us to learn all the halachas. However, we should try. But if you take it to a Rav, and you have an Erlich Rav, Emes Sabaki, a Talmid Chacham, when he doesn't know, he'll tell you he doesn't know. He'll call a colleague and he'll ask a shayla also. But that's the best way. And Klal Yisrael Kadosh Meir, Rabbi said the amount of bikush for Emes in business today is Meir v'ayim, and I believe that's what's powering the Hatzlacha and the Siyata D'Shmaya that the Yiddish business community is having today. We live in a golden age. There's Asach Aniyim, of it's the Asach Hashirim. And Alavai, we should be able to find us all Aniyim. But that Hatzlacha, I believe, is coming from that bikush, from that drive, from that rotzen, from that erlichkeit, from that leiv tov that Klal Yisrael has, from that kedusha, from that atzeres to want to do the right thing and to try to do the right thing and to genuinely seek the emes and the ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Eibishter should help that we should be zeichet taka to bring a ratzon, bring ratzon to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All our pulas should be able to ratzon. We'll be zeichet that the Rebbeinu should be mashur and the bracha b'maisi yadeinu.
Amen.
No need for an introduction. Avram, how long? How short, Avram? Bershus, those gathered here today, I want to give a yashikayach to those who are Mesader, who organized Yarchekala, essentially, for the purpose of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the workplace. That's really what it's about. In Shulchan Aruch, in Simirei Shlamid Aleph, in Chaim, the Mechaber says lahalacha that a person should, from a Yid, looks to make Kol Ma'asav L'Shem Shemayim. That's the Chazal say. But it's not just a Musar, it's a Siman in Shulchan Aruch. And a business is no different. A business, the Chavis Havavas writes in Shar B'Tachin, is a form of ishtadlus, and he says ishtadlus a mitzvah. That's what it is. So you're sitting in your office, so you're sitting maybe in your basement on a computer, or wherever you are, and you're really serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's really what it is. But it's all totally in the mindset. In business, we run into many shilas, many questions. Monsey, Chaim, Yerdeya, Ebenezer, and Choshen Mishpat. As is mentioned already over here, over the course of the questions answers, Shabbos and Yontif present many shilas as to how to do the right thing. In today's world, the fast-paced business world, it's come out impossible to run a successful business without encountering Shabbos shilas. Shilas of Kaveh Malachta L'Shabbos, as we explained earlier, when an employee is obligated to work on Shabbos Kodesh, obligated means either you tell them that they have to work, or they have to be available in case there's a need for work. Both of that is Kaveh Malachta L'Shabbos, and Kaveh Malachta L'Shabbos is Osher. The sign cases where you have employees who aren't obligated to work on Shabbos, but they're paid by the hour. It's called a schir yoim. A schir yoim, the Mishnah Berurah writes in Sharatzin and Simration and Beis, that even if he's not obligated to work on Shabbos, even if Meir he decides that he wants to, it's more convenient for him to work on Shabbos. If the payment structure is that of a schir yoim, it's Osher. Mishnah Berurah brings, he says, Adavar Pashat. And the Tzemach Tzedek has an Arichos and a Tshuva. Chaim, I think it's in Chavtes or Lamed Aleph. He says over there that it works b'Torah Shlichos, and maybe Yesh Shlichos l'Gai l'Chumra. He has an Arichos on it, based on the Sugis HaGemara in Perek Ezehu Neshech. Chol HaMoed is also an area where Shabbos is, where halacha is plays a very prominent role, and there too we have to be aware that Melacha and Chalamoid, Pragmatia and Chalamoid, being Isaac in business on Chalamoid, where there's no hechrich for it, where there's no need for it, where it's not a makom of hefsid, is problematic. Jewish businesses require employees to work on Chalamoid, so the owner goes on a Chalamoid trip, and he has a bunch of Kaila wives sitting and working for him on Chalamoid. Shaila, if there's a makom hefsid, maybe in a chanami, there's a makom to be made on Chalamoid. It depends on what the nature of the hefsid. Is it davar ovid? Is it minias revach? There are questions sometimes as to keeping your business closed on Chalamoid if you're going to lose potential customers who bought by you before, but now if you're closed, they're going to go to someone else. So is that a davar ovid or is that a minias revach? But Chalamoid is another area of halacha where, unfortunately, there's a lack of awareness that it's more mayed than chayil. That's what it is. It's a mikra kodesh, state in Rishonim, Chalamoid. And so Chalamoid is another area of halacha where, especially in today's world, to shut a business for a weekend mela, shut a business for 2 days yontif, to shut a business for 8 days, so people find it almost impossible. Especially if you're running an online business and orders need to be filled, and payments need to be processed, and returns need to be processed, and there's a need for customer service, especially if you have a service-based business. All of these structures are very difficult as it relates to Chalamoid. People with nursing homes, gewiss, daycare centers, many of the businesses that people have, real estate, there's a need for malacha. There's a need for the ability to do malacha. And so, as it relates to Shabbos and Yontif, and Chalamoid as well, there's a need to ask a shaila and give it in circumstances. In Yeredeya, just I'm running through some of the places where shailas come up all the time. Schayra b'macholas asuris, a very shvera shaila. Many people who provide services, so they look to make a profit on providing kitchen services. I had a shaila a little while back from a person who's Isaac in janitorial services, and one of the ways to get a leg up on the competition is he was willing to offer to bundle in kitchen services as well, and part of it was food. And so the shaila was, if that's a gather of schar machos asuris. So now, if you're not making any money, maybe there's a makom to mekel. If you are making money, so there's a question: is that called nizdamen loy? Do we say that your ikar business is not that? It really depends what the profit margins are, and how much money you make, and how much of a bulk percentage and a focus it becomes in the business. But schar machos asuris could be a real issue. I got a shaila a few weeks ago from a person who he invests money with businesses. So he was approached by somebody who owns a business, they sell across the country to chain stores. They sell treifa meat, not just basa nevela. He told me that they sell camel meat. I don't know, last I checked it was only a cigarette. Camel, who eats camel? Which hump do you get it from, I wonder? And he was approached by the owner of the business, and he was willing, the fellow had a cash crunch at the time, and he offered him to sell him shares. It's a privately owned business, but it's a large business. He offered to sell him shares at an excellent rate if he was willing to put up a few $1 million up front. But he was willing to sell him a nice chunk of the business. He would only own a small percentage of the business. And he wanted to know if there's any shilas involved. So that's potentially a real shilas. Schar machos asuris is an arichas and darkei about it. And that's not pashit. I mean, they're doing schayra beikar with treifa meat. And so, maybe there's structures to be matter at l'kulei alma. But l'chatchila is da zicha nisht. There's makayim to be mekel, there's what to talk about, there's chuvas in the paiskim about it, and maybe if you're not nice with the basar, there's a lot of room to work with. But the point is that's, I asked this person if he's struggling for panasa. So he said, I'm not doing so bad. He's being approached to put a few $1 million into a deal. I don't know, I wouldn't say I'm not doing so bad. I'd probably say I'm doing good. But he's not doing so bad. So if you're not doing so bad, so maybe it's kedai to leave such a deal on the table. But schar machos asur is a real shaila. Having workers even order treifa food. It's an arichas in the shachan taz. Having goyish workers order treifa food. And so schar machos asur is a real part of business where you need to be aware of problems. There are issues of lifnei iver all over the place. One of the things that my Rabbi Shmuel would lament constantly, how is it that Yiddish people own nursing homes and they feed treif to the people in the homes? Many of the people in the homes are Yidden. Most of them may be Frei Yidden. But they're breathing their last, they're living out their days, they're going to go meet the Rabbi in a few years. And v'safina lekitura, and you're stuffing him with treif, tarfus. How could it be such a thing? Maybe it's mutar al pidin, maybe you can sell the business to a guy, sell the kitchen part to a guy, so the guy should be feeding him treif. But how could you do that to a Yid? It bothered him so much. He would always speak about it. Anytime a person told him he's Isaac in nursing homes, he would ask him right away, is the kitchen kosher? And people would say it's too hard, it's too this, it's too that. It's very hard to understand. Somebody told me it's very hard to make it kosher. So I asked him what state he operates in. He told me Massachusetts. So I asked him, what would be if Massachusetts passed a law tomorrow that all nursing homes need to serve kosher? What would you do? Would you go out of business? You'd sell the business tomorrow? So he smiled. They said, we'd find a way. So I said, you should know God passed a law a few decades ago that you should serve kosher in nursing home. And if you're found uncompliant by his inspection, they don't just put you out of business. But the point is, it really depends on our attitude. That's really what it is. And so, lifnei iver is a shaila. I'll tell you another shaila I got. There's a shaila, or a shaila I observed, I should say. I didn't get the shaila myself. I was by the yeshiva a few years ago, and people called up. It was December time. So they were making a yontif party for their employees. I think it was 1,500 employees. It wasn't the yontif of Hanukkah. And the shaila was, they said that they're making a yontif party. The shaila is what to call it, and thus, what's teif and amutter. And they came up what they're serving. So they said they're serving a treifa caterer is X amount, and to have it, so the yeshiva said, serve them kosher. So they said serve kosher would cost over $100,000 more. So Yeshiva asked them, is there Yidden there? So they said there's probably some fry in there. So they said that they're going to have a kosher section. So you know what happens better when you have a kosher section. All the goyim go to the kosher and the frayim go to the treif. That's never what happens. When they had the signing of one of the accords in the Middle East, in the White House, the Israeli delegation went to the White House on Shabbos to sign it. And at the time there was a big tumult that they went in cars. And it was a shaila, how could you go in cars on Shabbos to sign such a thing, Chil Shabbos? It was a tumult wegen Chil Shabbos for Farhasia. And the Yeshiva, Shmuel gave a shmuz, and he spoke about it as well. And he said like this. He said, the Chil Shabbos Shabbai, no, Efshizam got a rabbi, maybe they had a rabbi who gave a heter, it's Pekuch Nefesh, held it was Pekuch Nefesh. No, Meir. The tarfus that they ate, the treif there also. But they had treif and they served kosher. So the Israeli delegation, most of them ordered treif. And somehow a guy made it on the news. So he said, the Chil Hashem Shabbai, no, Meir. But could you explain? They were matriach to make kosher for you? A mensch hat matriach gewen faraich, they were matriach for you, and you turn it down and you go say, no, thank you, I don't need your tircha, and I go eat treif. Wo is the menschlichkeit von a mensch? Iman menschlichkeit. Poshet, nicht frumkeit, menschlichkeit. Yeah? So these people told the Yeshiva they'll have a kosher section. So the Yeshiva says it's not good enough. Because the Freya people are going to end up eating tarfus. And he told them that it's worth $100,000 to cater the event kosher. And so is that al pidin? Is that a chumrah? Veisich nicht. Aber al kopanim, lifnei iver is matzeh moed. We spoke before about sending an employee to trade shows. Trade shows have mechshaylos beyond what you can imagine. The Gemara says in Baba Basra that if a person walks down a road with nashim or oimdes ala kvisa, where women wash their clothes, and so they had to, they weren't dressed appropriately at times because of the nature of washing clothes. And so the Gemara says that if it's ika darka achrina, if there's another derech, the Gemara says if you go down that road, you nikra rasha, even if you don't plan on looking. Shteit in Rishonim, in Rashbam. And so it's because a person puts themselves in a matzav and a sayin. So people go to all these shows, and they're confronted with an incredible barrage of re'iyos atzeres, women who are not dressed appropriately, interactions that are not appropriate. Many of them feel compelled to shake hands with women. They strike up conversation as well. If they stay in a hotel overnight, there's things nearby, especially if it's not in a good town. You could mamish end up destroying the ruchnius of a yid if you send somebody to a trade show. So how could you make parnasa? I think the answer is if you have to get a good guy. Get a good guy to go. Or maybe, I don't know if a Yiddish lady is an eitz either. But the point is that these are achrayas that we have. In Yonei Avodah Zarah, many people investing in real estate or in homes, nursing homes, and different things that entail real estate, end up encountering shilas about churches. Churches are shilas of Beis Avodah Zarah. It's a shilah machlekas of being seen in a chuvas mamshik. If a church, if the home of a church has a shem of a Beis Avodah Zarah mamish, if a church has a din of a Beis Avodah Zarah mamish or not, some machlekas wegen them. But Rabbi Moshe and Tshuva Paskins that a church pashas does have a din of a Beis Avodah Zarah. And so if you do a deal where you're now enabling the church to have services there or to continue having services there, so that could be a question of using a Mokum Shel Yisrael for a Beis Avodah Zarah. Again, many of these cases you could find heterim for. There are always das yachids that you can find and stadim that you can find to be makel on certain shilas. But the Reb Chaim Palaji in his Chuvas, in his Lev Chaim, he writes, befrat as it relates to questions of Avodah Zarah, or that have connections to Avodah Zarah, he writes that it's Bodek Menusa that those who do business, where the business entails a Beis Avodah Zarah or a Makom Avodah Zarah, He writes over there that it's Badaka Menusa that people end up losing their money. That's what he writes. Yeah, he writes over there that he recommends against it under all circumstances. And so, a Beis Avodah Zarah could be a real question. You got a shiloh this year about installing HVAC in a church. Again, there too, is there makom to be mekel? Possibly. But all of these things, you see, if you encounter the shiloh once in a while, you ask a shiloh, mele. But when a person's halach yelech is constantly you're encountering these questions, we're always being saimach on things. So nit hazeh geschmack. Ribbis, as we mentioned, all of business is ribbis. That's them. It's mali shilas ribbis. If you have one mortgage, you have a shilah ribbis. If you finance anything, most of the time it's questions of ribbis. Ribbis, I'm speaking interest, not the Issa ribbis now. And Kemat, all money that flows today has questions of ribbis involved. Credit cards have questions of ribbis, and co-signing things. A father wants to do a taiva for a child, so he co-signs a mortgage. You co-sign a mortgage, that's a Arav Kabbalah, maybe Arav Shluftatz even at times, especially if you're the one who's achroi. Arav Kabbalah ribbis is zichra asa. Arav Kabbalah. Arav Kabbalah means that you're held liable, that they could come to you just as quickly as they go to the other person on the loan. So you're signed on for a loan with interest for someone else. So it's as if you borrowed from the bank and then you turned around and gave it to them. You borrowed from the bank at X percent and then you turned it around and you gave it to your daughter at X percent. Or your son at X percent. So that's alva b'ribis. And I'm sorry? A husband to a wife, maybe it depends on the financial structure of the home. Yeah? But in the event that they're not one keshen, it's possible. If she's achroi to pay him back taka, then en chanami. Yeah, I don't know what together would be. A husband and wife, if one is borrowing from the other, they should see a Rav Stamazai. But I had a chaver who got married, and he told his wife, after a few weeks, he was telling her the musig of Mashakana Isha Kana Baila. So she says, in this home, it's Mashakana Baila Kana Isha. That's what she told him. But Al-Kapanim, technically, if she's borrowing from him, he's borrowing from her 100%. It depends on the structure, but there's no reason why not. And ribbis are shilas all over the place. Ribbis. Any time where there's money flowing and where there's interest involved, where there's differences in prices. 210 net 30. Tell knows what that is? 210 net 30. If you pay 10 days, you get X percent. And if you pay 30 days, you pay net. If you pay 10 days, only after 10 days, you get a hanocha, you get a discount. 210 net 30, some place can hold is pashut ribis. Because essentially what he's doing is that for you paying up front, for you paying early, agar notale, he's giving you wages, he's giving you schar, he's giving you profit. Agar notale could be ribis, 210 net 30. I mentioned before, I don't understand how you didn't lend to other Yidden cash advance. I don't understand it. Cash advances, future receivables, there's nothing there. There's no inventory there. So you can't buy something that's a loy bala olam. You're not buying a chelik in the business, and if he would sell his business tomorrow, you wouldn't be able to cash out on the sale of the business. You don't own a percentage in the business. Buying a future receivable is a push to davar shloi bala olam. There's no kinyan that's chal davar shloi bala olam. So you laid out money for a davar shloi bala olam. That's not a kinyan. That's a halva. And it's at percentages. So I don't know what the heter is for future receivables if you're doing it to Yid. Some things that people call a hakna is ribis. And so these questions are common all over the place. People lend money in return for a favor. People lend money and they say, give X percent, 10% more to tzedakah. Yeah? A frumme ribis, that's a frumme ribis. If you tell them to give money to an organization, to give a donation. And these are real questions. There's a new shaila that keeps cropping up. Seems to be a very profitable business. I don't know the ins and outs of it. Is people want to buy funeral homes. Funeral homes. So I'm not sure exactly how it works. Maybe the mace comes with a credit card in his pocket. I don't know how it's so profitable. But they say it's very profitable. So what's the shaila by funeral homes? So the biggest shaila that come out all funeral homes today have to have a crematoria is cremation. I think I heard from somebody that there's a higher percentage out there by the Asylum doing cremation than burial. So that's a problem. And many of them, again, we live in a world where many of the clientele is going to be Yidden. Forget about Goyim. Goyim come Kleinman. I feel like Goyim is aber by a Yid befrat. And so you have situations in which you could be mamish making money off of Isser, and you're providing it. So they can go somewhere else. That's very nice. But today you're doing it. You're Isser. You're employees. I asked a Shiva case where there was somebody. He said he can do a deal. Funeral homes. He said mamish can make an enormous amount, enormous return, millions of dollars. And the Shiva said I should tell him that it's Osher. And again, these are shilas was impossible. Zero day shilas. I'll tell you something I heard from Rishmul myself. I was in his office a few years ago, and somebody came in, asked for a bracha, and the Rosh asked him what he does. And he said that he has hospitals. So she said, what type of hospitals? So he said, end of life. So she said, what does it mean, end of life hospitals? What's mentas? Shmuel, when he would ask questions, normally he knew what the answer was, just wanted to pull it out. So the person says he has hospices. So should I ask him? He said, a Fuma Yid can run a hospice? Where they limit the medication of patients? I mean, it's really, he told him, he said it's a form of Ritzicha. So these are shilas again. I'm not drawing with a broad brush. I'm bringing up shilas. I'm not saying everything's aser. I'm pointing out pointers where a person has to know ashelas chacham veret achatzi tshuva. You have to know where to ask your shilas. And hospice is real questions. Besides for having a hospice question, but what is done in a hospice is real questions. Shvera shilas. And so these are some of the Yerdeidik shilas. Hospice of it's Ritzicha, it's Choshen Mishpat too, the end of Choshen Mishpat. Even Ezer. You run to Even Ezer. So Yichud, mentioned before, Shalas of Yichud. If you have a boss and a secretary, sometimes the structured office is that the balabas has his own office. Instead of the home being a mishkan, the office a mishkan. Zakaidish, the Akaidish HaKadashim. And the office, the boss has his own place, and he has his own secretary in that office. If there's ever time where that door is locked and nobody's allowed to walk in, I don't think anybody barging on the boss. So you have yichud shilas, real problems yichud. And so maybe if it's baila b'yir, maybe there's a makom to mekel, but baila b'yir makom shali by gaspa means when you have a relationship with her and you have an ongoing relationship, a day-to-day interaction is not so b'chal not pashut. Pesach v'suach baila b'gaspa also not so pashut. Beishmul is Meir on this. Beishmul and other places in Even Ezer. Yichud after hours, gefährliche shilas. And Yichud becomes real questions. And I mentioned before, and I'll mention it again, the sakonis that exist in the workplace where there's a mixing of the genders is impossible to overstate. Mamish impossible to overstate. If I would say some of the shalos over here, people wouldn't believe them. Some of the situations that come in. Shreklach, but from Yidden. And so you have to know that in a workplace, whatever shmira you put up is kodesh yoimeloi, kodesh kadashim. Every shmira, every extra shmira you could make. Maybe you can make a shmira that the girls are in the women are in their own location, kodesh yoimeloi. If you make a shmira that you speak to them, you refer to them by last names, kodesh yoimeloi. And kol makom shata moitze geder erva ata moitze kedusha. Wherever you find a geder b'snei erva, that's where kedusha is found. And we have to know that the nisyonis in every workplace is gefährlich. It's a well-known thing that unfortunately by the Asylum, maids end up striking up a relationship with housekeepers, strike up a relationship with people in the house. How does that work? A person wants to have a shaykhs somebody who's cleaning the bathroom. But the answer is that the Yetzer Hara shlaf nicht. Yetzer Hara doesn't sleep. And we have to know this. In the workplace, the sakonas are impossible. And the only way for us to overcome it is to be aware of it. And awareness is half of the solution. Histaklis, Hishtamshis Benashim, speaking to women. Now let it be Mar B'sicha Ma'isha, Afilu Mishtayamru. Kol Shekem with other Nashim. These are halachos in Shulchan Aruch. Histaklis Benashim is in the regular version of Shulchan Aruch, not just in the Bnei Brak version. It's everybody across the board. Histaklis Benashim. Histaklis Benashim doesn't mean an Isha is not dressed tznius. Histaklis Benashim means Afilu Isha Ka'ura. Even if she's ugly. Even if she's a Democrat. Histaklis Benashim is Osher. That's the Metzias. It doesn't make a difference who it is. And so we have to know to take the halachas of Shulchan Aruch seriously. That's Even Ezer. Choshen Mishpat is full. Poaching employees. Very, very schwer, poaching employees. People go to other employees and they poach them. If someone's working for somebody else, Al Pidin, it's Osher. Al Pidin. Minchas Pitim is Meir on this, some Reish Lamed Zayin and Choshen Mishpat. And by a Malamed, maybe you're allowed to poach a Malamed. In Shulchan Aruch is Mavur, by a Malamed has a din of a Metzia. But a regular Poil not. And some people have headhunters, they call them. Headhunters. And a headhunter who poaches an employee from another business when they're working for someone, they're appoiled by somebody else, is not pashut. Somebody reaches out to you, it's an under a maisa. You're allowed to put out an advertisement that you're looking for an employee. And if someone reaches out to you, it's a different story. But to go after somebody else could be big problems. Stealing a deal, when you know two people are negotiating on a deal. So if they haven't hit a price yet, an end price, the halacha is that it's mutter. But the Pesach Tshuva says that if they're handling and they're negotiating, they're almost there, and if nobody would have jumped in, the deal would have gone through. Pesach Tshuva says that that's called Hasagas Gvul. And so these are questions. Concealing imperfections. I'm not just talking about lying. A person, the halacha is that Shulchan Aruch says that im yesh mum b'micha yitzarech la'idiyah l'lekeach. If you have a mum in your mekach, you have to tell lekeach. That's what you have to do. So if there's a mum, you can't speak it out in a different way that the person doesn't chap what it is. I'll tell you a story. I bought a car when I moved to Lakewood. I moved back from there. I lived in Eretzel for a while. I moved back to Lakewood. I bought a car. So I went to a certain place, and he tells me the car asked him, are there any problems? He said it has a hard shift. Anybody knows what a hard shift is? I'm not a mechanic. I didn't know. I think most people don't know what it means. So I said, hard shift? All right. He says, yeah, it doesn't shift well. So good. So I got in the car. I turned it on. I moved the shift. It went well. It shifted to park, and it shifted to reverse, and to neutral, and to drive. Tried it a bunch of times. I figured maybe there was an issue. I don't know, but it was fine. I drove the car, took it for a test drive for around 6 minutes. It was a good price. I bought it. A week later, I started noticing, I'm driving on the highway, and the car doesn't go from one gear to the next easily. So I try to pick up steam, and it's a gate nicht. And so I called up the Meir, and I said the car has a problem, that its pashut doesn't have any pickup. So he says, yeah, I told you it has a hard shift. So I told him I don't know what a hard shift. I didn't know what a hard shift is. I was driving a Sachakol a week, no accidents, nothing. And he didn't want to take the car back. And he said, no, I told you it's a hard shift. Maybe he thought that I knew what a hard shift was. But I think most people don't know what a hard shift is. And the said this person continued to do this, many of his lekuchas, and after 3-4 years, he closed down. Because the Metzias is, like we mentioned before, it's a pasuk. Is the Metzias. Yeah, person, you have to be honest. We have to be erlich. We have to tell people as much as possible the emes about what we're selling and what we're doing. Choshen Mishpat, there are halachas of Baltalin. Baltalin means paying wages. Paying wages on time, I think, is one of the greatest, it's one of the things that cause the greatest consternation by people. You have vendors who invest koiches, energy, time, money. Not just vendors, service providers. A locksmith, a plumber, an electrician. They work from mina boiker ad ha'orev. They don't see their families. They're crushed under the weight of all the different expenses a Yiddish mishpacha has. And then they send a bill and crickets. And they meet the person, and the person says, I don't have money, I can't pay you now. I'll pay you 6 months. I'm waiting for money to come in. And then the fellow goes on a vacation at some hotel for Pesach. And he goes here and he goes there, and he makes a fancy bar mitzvah, but he doesn't have money to pay a few $1,000s. And the metzias is that it's mamish, it destroys people. It mamish destroys people. Ki nafsha yuchayvel. You hold on to somebody's wages, you're holding someone's neshama in your hands. Not just the neshama, you're holding their shalom bayis, you're holding their children's chinuch. You know what it means when a person feels like they're choking, like they can't breathe, and they have children at home, and they have interactions with their children. A person comes home and feels he can't breathe, and then his child comes and has a tantrum. You know what he's going to do to the child? He's going to explode on him. And it destroys people. And then his wife isn't up to par. And who knows what happens. Nafsha yuchayvel. Paying employees on time is so vital. And so really the emis's business is a minefield. That's the truth. It's very, very hard to be erlich in business. But as we mentioned before, the avodah is to be aware, to have an awareness. Every yid in this room and every yid out of this room, Rav Ruban of Klal Yisrael want to do the right thing. Rav of us are looking to do the right thing. We want to be emes, we want to be erlich. Nobody wakes up in the morning saying, I'm going to mess someone over today. Nobody does that. People wake up, they want to be, at least only our competition wakes up like that. But besides for that, nobody else. People wake up, they want to do good. They want to do good. They want to be good to Yidden. They want to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom. They want to be erlich. They want to take care of other people. They want to help other people. Klal Yisrael, Nitvam, V'naisim, Klal Yisrael, Baishanim, Rachmanim, Goyim Lechasadim. That's what Klal Yisrael are. That's the hallmark. That's part of our DNA. But it's in the sign. Money is a gewaldig in the sign. It's incredible in the sign. Ki ha'sheichad ya'aver in echachamim v'salav devet tzadikim. It's the sheichad of money is so difficult. And when there's money involved, we have all the cheshbonos in the world. And we believe that we're right. You know, in the summer, I go to Camp Aguda in the second half. So in the afternoons, I learn on the lawn. And right near me, there's a football field. Right there by the bunk area. They play football. And so I have to get up and clear my head, take a little walk, and I'll stand around by the field. And I'm despoiled from something, and I think this is an insight into the human condition. So the fellow throws a pass, and the guy catches it right by the ground, at 3 millimeters from the ground. It was all the way downfield. As Hashayla, did it hit the ground, did it not hit the ground? There's 20 kids on that field. 10 and 10. 10 of them are going like this, and 10 of them are going like this. So what happened there? Well, everybody became shakranim all of a sudden. They're all lying, and they're fighting for it too. And if the ref rules one way, the other side says, Rasha, you have the gears, all the things that they tell her of. Yeah? Unbelievable. How does that work? You know the answer? The answer is that people really believe it. 10 boys saw him catch it. And 10 boys saw it bounce. They really did. You were downfield. If he would have held up a poster, you couldn't read the thing. How'd you see if it hit the blade of grass? But I saw it. I saw it with my own eyes. How could you not? And that's a window into the human condition. When there's money at stake, we see it a certain way, and we can't fathom it a different way. And that's why the Rebbeinu Shalom made us. That's not a rishus, but that's what it means. Ha'odam nivdak b'koisai, b'kisai, u'b'kaisai. The test of man is not when all things are going good. It's not when it's easy. The test of man is when things are difficult. When a person drinks a kois, a person could be a shikr. So you would say, this is not who he is. He's really a gewaldige person. He got shikr. No. The test of a person is b'koisai. When there's a little bit off balance, who is the person? B'kaisai. When there's something riling the person up. Who are you? That's the test of who you are. and Bekisa as well. When it comes to money, I always hear all the time, he's such a good person. When it comes to money, I'm always a little funny. No. Adam nivdak bekisai. Our avodah is to find a way to pass the tests of the bekisai. And just like the bekisai is so difficult to pass the test of bekisai, and just like Bekaisai is so difficult to pass that test of Bekaisai, if you want to know how difficult the Nisayan of money is, Chazal equate Kisai to Kaisai and Kaisai. And the awareness of the strength of the Nisayan is what gives us the capabilities and the tools to understand when we're in a matzah of Nisayan, and the steps and the measures which we have to take to overcome that Nisayan. When a person understands the nature of the danger, you're driving up a mountain. Not these mountains. My in-laws live out west. So they took us once to Bear Mountain. One time they took us. Since then I never went again. I always tell them, I don't know if there's a minion there. That's an excuse. So it's Bear Mountain's thousands and thousands of miles high. And you drive up these thin little roads, you go around the mountain. I had a shayla if you mechiv to bench goimel. Unbelievable. You're driving and you're looking over Azay and every time the car turned, I said, okay, everybody lean this way. It's a sakana. When you're driving up a cliff, but when you're driving up a cliff, you don't hit the gas and do 70. Why not? Because we understand the nature of the sakana. When a person understands the nature of the challenge, the nature of the situation that they're in, they're able to employ various tools to overcome those nisyanis. And that's the key to being erlich. That's the key to staying erlich. Nobody can make sure that they're never going to get angry. Most people. And a person who drinks a significant amount can't ensure that he won't get drunk. Somebody who deals with money, it's impossible to ensure that you'll be erlich all the time, unless we employ safeguards. And like we mentioned before, the only eitzah that I know is aseh l'charav. If you get in the habit of not just asking a shayla, but every deal, every interaction, you have a Rav who's involved every step of the way. Some people shterzach. Maybe have a Rav who doesn't have a ma'aseh, so he won't start asking you for contributions. But you have a Rav, maybe it's kedayet to have a Rav who has a ma'aseh. You'll be zech have the schus hatayra. But if you have a Rav, you have a Talmid Chacham who's there with you every step of the way, in every interaction, in every questionable circumstance, in circumstances where you don't know if there's a question. So you'll have that anchor to make sure, as ma bleibt erlich. Adam nivdak the kaisai bekisai bekaisai. The kisai is just as hard and just as difficult, just as challenging, and just as dangerous as the kaisai and the kaisai. And so, an awareness of the shaylas, an ounce of prevention is a pound of cure, as they say. So the prevention is having a Meir, a Talmid Chacham on staff. And if we do that, and we look to serve the Rabbi Shalom properly, if we look to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we recognize that Parnasa comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Eibishter is Mefarnas us, and Parnasa is the same thing as Kriyas Yamsuf. No Jew on the shores of the Yamsuf thought that they could split the Yamsuf. Nobody thought like that. There was no one who even convinced themselves. Parnasa is the same thing. No one should convince themselves that they're able to make a parnasa without the Rabbi Shalom. It's the Rabbi Shalom who butters our bread. When we recognize that, and when we internalize that, and we employ tactics and strategies to avoid the matzav of Nisayan, and to have somebody who's almost an oversight, who's able to identify situations of Nisayan, questionable situations, will be zeicha to be as erlich as could be. The hishtadlus to be erlich will lead to erlichkeit, will lead to atzlacha. Chaysamei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu emes will be zeicha to the chaysim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Rebbeinu will put his stamp on every deal that we do.